With the last
What
tuba
up?
fart, we go live. What's going on, Ray Kampmeier? Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me in.
Raymond James Kampmeier.
That's my name.
What's going on,
What's been
dude?
going on today?
Well, I went for a little bird watching just a second ago, but I went down by the river and I saw the same birds that I saw the other time when I went down the river. So it wasn't anything as exciting, but I got different like views of them, and they stuck in my head a little bit more about like what are the calls, what do they look like, you know, seeing them again. But I was disappointed. I was only out there for an hour, so but at the same time,
What,
yeah.
what are we talking here? Like geese? Or like what kind of
There's
bird?
the common grackle, which is like it looks like a crow, kind of a little bit, but it's got a blue head. It's like a
Whoa.
raveny looking thing. It sounds kind of like a crow, not really. Doesn't have a caw, but it's got these crazy noises. And then the tree swallow are these like they were really bright blue tree swallows. Like they have really cool noises. And
How, how do you know like what these are? Do you have like a book or did someone teach you
yeah,
what
I
these
got an
things are?
app. It's called Merlin, like this Merlin ID app. And then I just bring my binoculars. That I think it's like binoculars from my old man. I was like, "Do you have any binoculars?" And he's like, "Yeah, I guess I'm outside." And they literally have like the Goodwill sticker on them. It's like these old binoculars, and the focus is like this bizarre like plate that you move like from left like that. And
Dude, optics don't go bad. Optics are
it's
like,
dude,
it's like
I take photos with my camera in one of them. Like with these, they look really shit when you look at them. Like it's hard to even see. They're so small, anything. But
yeah.
when I put my phone on it, it's like all of a sudden this huge, awesome. I don't know.
Dude.
I get like very crisp and clear photos and things. Well,
Okay,
not super
you're
crisp,
gonna
but
appreciate this then, Ian. I made this plate for that exact thing where you can
what?
align your phone. You can like glue your phone case to this case so that it always like slots on to the eyepiece.
Oh shit.
It's made for like a microscope, like a lab microscope, but it could easily be adapted to
Yeah.
you know my binoculars.
Because all I need is one of them. I don't need two of them. Like I just need one, and then honestly, it's like more precise, and it's just like a DIY camera. I mean, I do have
Yeah.
a camera too. I could just get a
What,
lens,
what's
but
what's that called again when you get like that like circular silhouette when like your
uh,
lens is bigger, like oversized compared to your aperture. Sorry, your sensor or whatever is like so you get that
it's not silhouette, is it?
vignette.
Vignette. Yeah,
Yeah,
because I had that. I just got a new lens. I'm not using it right now because it's so like the light was shining, and it's a wide angle lens, and the light is it's really not that good in low light or really high light or really low light, and it's a
mm,
wide angle. And before I got the wide angle lens, I had here's the well, I don't know what this is, but this is the wide angle. Came with like a micro and a macro pseudo wide angle, you know,
I
and
see. Yeah, what are those called again? They're like I want to say like Bowden lens or something, where it's just like you add it to the like stack of your lenses and it just like amplifies, it like magnifies by like 2x or like
you said
half x.
Bowden.
I searched that. I've totally Barlow lens. You
Barlow.
can use it to like divide the focal length of your lens by two.
Wow.
It's again, I think it's maybe even more for like microscopes, but it's the same like fundamental stuff.
Yeah, you're right.
Um,
You're right. Optics never go out of style, right? I mean, it's just like,
they never go obsolete. You know what I
yeah,
mean? It's never like you're like, oh, those that microscope or those binoculars are like, oof, that's '90s technology. They're worthless.
yeah, right. I mean, there's better ones, right? I mean, we've gotten the optics. We can get more precise and we can get more power behind them now, right?
Yeah.
But
Oh, what, dude? Something that's again, this is like small scale stuff. This is for tiny things, but have you checked out like DIY like scanning microscopes where it basically does like what your phone does for a panorama, and it like it has a microscope and it like mechanically slides the
Oh,
stage across, and so it's capturing like 1% of the overall photo, and it's just doing 100 of those photos and stitching them together.
right.
So you could do that with a leaf or a sample of an insect or something, and then share that ultra high resolution photo, and people can just like delve in and be like, I saw the leaf, I want to see what its veins look like, and they can like get in really close.
Huh.
I thought it was like neat. I thought it was kind of a cool prospect for like, I don't know, just a good DIY project.
Yeah, that. So did you do that then? You made that, or are you saying someone else did?
No, no, I was just looking at that, like that was the thing. Like I hadn't people use it to like photograph like chips and like nanotechnology, like little like nano
Hmm.
robots and these like microscopic manufacturing techniques. You use that to like audit your work and like scan over it. Um, but I just started to see some hobbyists do it themselves just because like with Arduino and stuff like
Yeah.
that, it's all of a sudden so much more approachable.
Yeah, you can just DIY
Uh,
this stuff. If you have the power and the access to it, you can just totally just do it yourself, right? Just might as well.
yeah.
Some
Uh,
things are nice to just like you're not gonna DIY your own Arduino, right? I don't know.
you're not gonna. You maybe it depends what you're going for. Something that I wanted to mention, like you might be into this, maybe for something bird related or just a project or like a cool like music video or something. But Raspberry Pi, they make those like
Yeah,
DIY affordable computers.
I have a two
These like
Raspberry Pi
tiny.
2. I have one.
Okay, nice. So do you know how they have a camera that they make for it?
I did not know that.
I think yours works with these cameras, and they just recently released like a high quality, like point and shoot quality, 12 megapixel camera board for like $30.
Whoa.
Yeah, so you could like screw your own lenses in there. It uses like C mount, it uses like the old school security camera lens mount, but I've never seen this. For decades, I've been like, I really want to make my own camera so you can do these like cool stitching effects, so you could do like some time lapse and stuff. And just last week, they released this. I, I don't know why it's taken so long, but maybe because the sensors are made by like Sony, and maybe Sony just really didn't want to get caught up in the like DIY space.
Yeah, I mean they have in the past, right? With some whether they liked it or not. I remember the Sony PSP days. That seemed like a big DIY community. That was
Oh, good point.
and PS2 they did have some open game, like people were able to build programs for PS2, right? And like customize, like you were able to like create custom firmware for like one of the original PS2 versions, and then they like quickly put the fucking lid on that. They were like, no,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
but
I
the
mean, you
cat was out
used
of
to
the
run
bag.
like Linux on your PS3, right? Remember when they
Yeah.
let you run
Oh yeah, that was PS3.
operating
Yeah, that was
systems?
PS3. Right. Yeah, I did. I remember that. I had like a whole custom. You could like dual boot it, or like you like run off. You could run off a flash. I don't. I think I don't remember like formatting the PS3 itself, but
Yeah,
maybe.
I think they just set you up for it. I think you're right that they were kind of trying to foster those like DIY open, more of like open communities.
Yeah, I mean, because you do that, and then you get these huge communities. But I mean, it comes with a lot of headaches, maybe, and like they
The
can't,
risk.
and there's a little more risk, and they can't totally like monetize every aspect of your life. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like
right.
they can't be like,
Good
if
point.
you want this, like, because when you can you can use their machine willy nilly. Everyone's just gonna put fucking put Ubuntu on it, and then just have emulators all day, like just or use the hardware as a computer and the built-in graphics stuff. But
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a the PSP was like that too, but I remember who remember the name of the guy who would always crack their firmware?
I don't know. I
Do
mean,
you remember?
do you think it's even a guy, or do you think it's like PSP? Do you think it's Sony kind of
I
like
remember.
that's
Yeah, I remember you
a
having that theory. I remember thinking that was probably no. That was like it has to be. It was like a French guy or like a French name or something. Maybe not. I don't know.
because if that person was an employee and it was secretly sanctioned, it would absolve them of a lot of liability. Like if there's a
Right.
security
Exactly.
a flaw or a security fault that like compromises a bunch of people's data, then they can just be like, hey, someone was
It's just
rogue and
hackers,
like
bro.
yeah.
But I mean, Sony's got
Uh,
breached before, right? I mean, Sony Pictures got breached and like didn't all these movies and things and all like people's emails and like really like celebrities information and like all this. Not even that. It was no wait. Yeah, there was that, and there was a huge Sony network breach. I remember too, like everyone's passwords and stuff. Sony doesn't have the best record with that shit. I think, like,
yeah. It's weird. Like you mentioned, they'll open companies will open up aspects of their networks or their products until that open community starts finding ways to make money on it that
right,
doesn't pass through their pockets. And and
right.
in
You
the
sell
meantime,
the custom firmware.
they're in complete control of like the monetization. But then most of these companies like have these big security breaches and security lapses. It's like it's
Anyway,
almost like
yeah.
visibly too much to handle. It shouldn't be all of that monetization shouldn't be amassed by this one like greedy dragon of a company.
Yeah, I mean, I was able to make some money off the PSP. I would sell some like things to other people with PSPs. I'd like sell my labor and customize it and load it up with some ROMs and stuff in high school, you know, or with some like
Yep.
movies and things, you know. And
Yeah.
I mean, like I don't know, it seemed like the right thing to do when we were a kid, you know.
Yeah. It definitely seemed like if
Piracy
that
was
was
just like
stealing or
everywhere.
whatever,
Yeah, it was
like
like
it felt like
before
Robin
the days
Hood.
of Napster, like right around the days of Napster, it was like this big. Yeah, I don't know. Like people didn't expect that to happen. I don't think that any of these legacy industries, even these probably the heads of Sony, you know, they're still businessmen, right? Yeah, some of them are probably pretty tech savvy and engineers, but they're still businessmen, and they're they're not. I don't know. I it's a that's a great question whether or not it was a rogue employee or like or if it was just someone who just used to work there or like really knows it, because it has to have been
Right.
someone like they'd release something and they would have the cracked firmware like the next day, like
Right.
like
Like Ian, I design electronics for a living. As the person that designs them, it's like it's work. It's my work to update them and to modify them. So I can only imagine someone coming in from the outside, say they weren't an employee and it was a person, coming in from the outside with no blueprints, no schematics, no manuals, no
right,
context, and trying to crack the walls of this designed castle.
and
It
then
just
reverse
seems
engineer it
right.
and then find the exploits, and then it takes us
And then productize that or package it to give to these people like us
at a
who
mass
installed
scale,
it.
yeah, for a whole community. Yeah, I mean, he's Robin Hood, man.
Right. I mean, if it was one man, there's a reason we get adorned them with like godlike status.
Yeah, it really did. I was just like, I don't know who these people are, but they just made my little machine into like something of the future. Like there you can do that stuff on phones now, but like before the smartphone, that's basically what it was. Like it didn't have a touch screen, but like you were able to I was able to run N64 emulator on that shit, dude. Like
We had like the Nintendo Switch decades earlier.
right, exactly. Yeah, the Switch. Yeah, it's just like the Switch. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is like, I know the PSP. They came out with another PSP, right? But it was like it was interesting design, but it just totally flopped.
Yeah, smaller or something.
I don't think they really. Yeah, I'm not really. Who knows what's going on in that? I mean, I don't really. I haven't followed. I haven't followed the PlayStation empire or whatever the franchise like more really closely late. I know there's new. Well, the last one was the PS4, right? And then or is the PS5 already exist, or is that already a thing?
I mean, every once in a while, I just see like
And,
fan drawings of like what I can't tell if it's a concept or if it's like the new one or if it's even the generation past. That
right.
last I know of was like four, yeah, PlayStation 4.
Yeah, I think my brother had the PlayStation 4.
Let's
Yeah,
see.
it's definitely an interesting thing. I'm the Switch you hear more hype about the Switch, but then again, console gamers are pretty dedicated, and Xbox I would imagine is still pretty big. But it seems like PC gaming is kind of like taking over. Like it's finally like I don't know, like the console wars type thing. They feel silly now a little bit. Like I don't know. Maybe it's just
Well,
because I'm out of
you
that world a little more, but like I've always been in the PC gaming world, but to a degree, one foot in. But
Ian, you remember Moore's law?
yeah, it's exponential growth of and exponential of like speed and and also of like the decrease in acceleration and miniaturizations of things, right?
Yeah, it's like this computer law where
It's not a real
every
law,
seven.
but
It's right. Sorry. It's
yeah, yeah.
a rule of thumb. It's a approximated trajectory of like industry growth, but the idea is that every 17 months, and granted, this is not in effect anymore. We kind of we've outgrown the Moore's law age,
Is
but in the
yeah.
90s and early 2000s, every 17 months, computers would get twice as fast. They'd be able to miniaturize transistors and package way more of them onto a chip, and they became more power efficient. So you didn't have to worry about overheating and stuff. So you could clock them faster. And at this point, we're like stagnant. Like I've had my computer for a decade and it's cranking. It's just going fine. So maybe
Hmm.
now like there always used to be that leg up where like console games had like the fastest GPU. It was like a
Right.
custom computer. Like it was a gaming computer through and through. Whereas now it's like we've had desktops that are the same performance for like, and granted, someone might bite my head off who's a gamer and be like, you know nothing. Like, I have the best graphics cards, latest. Like, I know that
I have
there are these
12
like new
cores, Ray.
improvements.
I have 12 cores on both my CPU and my GPU.
Exactly, you need all those cores. But I just mean like it's
It's the
been like kind
power
of
wall,
diminishing.
right? Is that what that is? Like or do is it like, is it just because people's needs haven't reached that, or is it consumer driven, or is it because is there actual physics that is stopping?
It's a couple things. It's like physics, and we're approaching the limit of what our our fabrication technologies can do. So it's like we hit this like amazing burst in innovation when we started inventing the transistor and integrated circuits, and we now have these like computing devices, smartphones, like long distance calls, like all of these new communication technologies are made available, and we just kept improving them, and now we're getting to this point where the transistors we're making in our computer chips are so small that we can't make them any smaller. So it used to be a matter of
Hmm.
just being like, hey, let's get more precise instruments to fabricate these. And now Intel and AMD are kind of like jockeying for that leader position, but they're still flirting, they're having to cut corners or use tricks to just even get the transistors to be more performant or to be smaller. So,
So are they?
this is
Is there?
all just
Is Do
yeah.
you think then micro technology is reaching a limit? Like, do you think it's starting to plateau? Like, because I've heard things about nano, like graphene and stuff, where transistors are are atoms essentially. Like, you can make a
Right.
transistor that you can say yes or no on an atom, and you can like then make a molecule a circuit,
Right.
or
Right.
more or
So I
less.
mean,
I don't know how that
I
actually
think like
works.
what you're getting at is like we need another breakthrough. Like the trick that we learned in like the 70s, 60s to like make transistors, like we rode that out to the end of its. We're riding that out to the end of its life. So like one example is
But what was
electric
fueling
car
that?
manufacturers. What's that?
Well, like what was fueling that innovation? People's demand, like because it was so much cheaper to make something awesome like that, or was it like, was it Cold War? Like for like people was like, let's
Oh,
make. I don't know. I'm just wondering like why.
what fueled the innovation leading to the transistor development?
Yeah, like
Yeah, it's actually it's a good guess with the Cold War, and that certainly kept that kept the acceleration, kept the foot on the gas. But the original was made in Bell Labs, and it was made for what were the telephone buildings, telephone exchanges? They were made to
was it fast
patch
Fourier
people
transform?
in to what?
Sorry, go ahead.
What you remember like in photos or videos, old videos of like telephone exchanges where there was like people patching cables. It looked like they're playing with
Yeah,
the
monkeys.
Eurorack synth or something.
Yeah, like modular
Like they're
synth.
yeah, right. Ooh, that'd be a great music video or like some old school like
Yeah,
um so those people, they were the operators. They were saying, hey, where do you want to call? Okay, I'm going to patch you into Dallas, and Dallas is going to
right.
patch you into here. And the crazy thing is that like you know, for every long distance call you want to make, you had to hopscotch through 10 different cities through their telephone exchanges. So it got to be to a point where the system was so complex, we couldn't rely on this army of human operators. We needed like
Hmm.
a computer, what we now know as a computer, to like, which is basically an arrangement of switches to kind of like pipe people's phone calls to the right destination.
So you were, it was just an automatic switcher. It was just a switch. So you're saying the switch was the like they were trying to miniaturize that, and Bell, because Bell Labs, from my understanding, Bell Labs also was the first motherfuckers to do voice encoding, like digitally. Like they
Oh,
like wi- without without Bell Labs, like we would have no telephone, we would have no microphones, we would have no, you know what I mean? Like
right. Oh yeah, dude. That I mean it.
these guys are crazy.
So Ian. So before they made this transistor switch, the telephone exchanges used to take up a whole city block, and they use mechanical switches. So they're using like mechanical relays. These really
Huh.
complex electromechanical parts, and the problem is those are huge. They draw a ton of power, and they move. They're mechanical. So the idea with the transistor is that's
Just
a
like
solid
tons of
state
wear.
device,
Yeah.
and so it's kind of like it's kind of like our spinning platter hard drives, disk hard drives, moving
Right.
to flash memory. It's just like leaps and bounds more performant, in a lot of ways, and it'll get better and better. But it's kind of like the next evolution.
Yeah, hard drives are just awful now. It's just like I look at it, I'll be like, "Ugh, get out of here, you Stone Age like piece of shit." You know, like you're not wanted here. Like it's
Right.
you hear it, like I hear old laptops. I have this old laptop I gave to Nora, and the hard disk is just like failing. I have to like turn off certain Windows services because it's just so old and it's trying to do so much, like constantly at 99% usage of the disk, you know, all the time. And you can just hear it
And you feel it.
grinding. Yeah, you
You
can.
know when you turn it sideways.
Yeah, you can feel the magnet. The what is that? The mag. I forget what is that. The
Yeah,
centrifugal.
there's like rotational inertia.
And
You're
yeah,
like trying to defy the way it's spinning. It's like a gyro.
and actually, I was getting electrical interference too, because I was using that as my side biddy for my no as my side computer for my for my looping and stuff. And the hardware, when the hard drive would go crazy, it would like there was interference that was going through a USB, the USB and the audio port. Like I was able to hear the noise from like through from recording a different interface from that machine. It was just like wow. And I just remember reading
That's a
online, people are
really
like,
scary realization when you're driven crazy by the sound, and then you realize the sound is also coming through your headphones.
right now,
Yeah. It's like infected not only the audio in your room, but it's like traveling, it's traversing your digital cables.
yeah, like I take my headphone off and it just yeah, it just follows me. I go downstairs, I turn on the TV, there it is. Yeah, then it's in your head at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been I don't know how long I've had it, but I've started to realize a couple of years ago of tinnitus or tinnitus, and I
Mhm.
definitely have tinnitus. But I don't know if it's because I'm like more aware of it now. I like forget about it, and I just like the more you think about it, the more you like focus on it, the louder it gets, and the more like anxious you get from hearing it. And then, I mean, I haven't been to a concert in forever, so my ears are probably like doing great right now, probably the best they've ever been. Because I'm not blasting it, but there's definitely and I don't record really loud music now anymore. Like I mix really quiet and stuff. So like you're supposed to anyway. Like when I was a kid, I would mix with a max limiter already on it. So like it was just always going, and it was just like whenever I turn it up, and it just to like be engulfed in the noise, and it's
Wait,
just
what does
like
a max limiter mean?
a limiter is a type of compressor that essentially whatever signal's coming in, it puts it at wherever you tell it to go. So like
Oh, okay.
it's like usually a limit at people limit. It's part of the mastering process usually. So like
Hmm. It's like normalizing it.
more or
It's kind of
less.
like normalizing the amplitude.
Yeah, it's an amplitude compression type thing. I think normalization technically isn't. It's not limiting because you're not actually like you're just expanding the natural data, whereas limiting will like box your. It'll like you can remove data. Data will get you can't you
It
might
like
lose data.
clips too.
Yeah, like when you see like a hard limiter, I guess that's what I meant instead of a max limiter. Like a hard, like you can see a waveform and it just looks like a rectangle. You
Okay.
know what I mean? Like every
Yeah.
peak is the same, and so like it's just this. Yeah, it just looks like a rectangle. Whereas when you normalize something, all the natural peaks and valleys and dynamics in the waveform still
Mhm.
maintain, but they do get they do increase in amplitude. I think normalization is an amplitude like manipulator, whereas limiting is a compression. So like you're actually doing some more like conditioning to the actual signal.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a it's I would the noise the loudness is I can't deal with that. But I mean I could imagine. I've heard I would go on Reddit and people would be like, I'm hearing this, it's getting louder, I can't deal with it. I hear that, man. I just like don't drink as much caffeine and just like let your ears rest and wear earplugs. Everyone should wear earplugs when you go to a show. Like where it doesn't matter unless if it's like a rock show.
Yeah.
If it's like a two piece like chill thing, like it's or like an acoustic thing, like it's fine. Like you usually don't need earplugs, but if you can hear it or you can feel it when it hurts. Like if you're actually paying attention. But a lot of times people are like, go to a hardcore show and you just see some guy right in front of all the stuff, and he's just like, I think that's part of the experience is that they like are so engulfed in this painful immersion in this loudness.
It's like moshing for your eardrums.
Yeah, it's like just beating it down.
Yeah.
It's hardcore, but it's amazing what the ears can take. But yeah, I was just watching something about that cochlea and this crazy anatomy, man.
The
How
cochlea, the spirally part.
yeah, yeah, it's the spirally with little hairs on them that are like the
Is
act
that
as
is that for impedance matching? Is that like a horn?
it's like from my understanding it's like it's the sensors that read the micro vibrations of air.
Oh, and then
So
but the cochlea, like,
yeah,
do you
the
know like what I
cochlea
mean
is
by
some
like
like
a horn being impedance matching?
yeah, the cochlea is I don't know, that's my anatomy like I just remember reading about it and like the mathematics behind it, how like it's perfectly made in a way where yeah, you can decode the sensory data in just
So cool.
this weird spirally thing. And I don't know, I'm no expert at that stuff, but like I think I was just watching some video that was explaining it, and I was just mind blown again, just being like, "Whoa!" Like how our ears are able, like, to just,
Mhm.
and they're not even that good. We got a lot of, there's a lot of empty illusion space, blind spots, more or less.
Yeah,
We can't hear.
and how it's wired up to our brain. Like what was the McGurk effect here we were talking about a couple years ago?
Oh yeah, the McGurk effect. It's just like a cross-modal illusion where
Right.
when an audio and a video source, like when your cognition receives two signals. I mean, everyone's experienced this when they've seen a music video and they've seen like music playing and someone singing and someone on TV, or like some other footage of someone talking, and you just see the voice match up perfectly with the mouth.
Or you know those like NFL voiceovers? There's like a guy making silly
Oh
voices
yeah,
and
the
he's like saying
bad
what
lip
he
reading.
the bad lip reading,
Yeah,
like
dude, that
that's
shit's
the McGurk effect.
hilarious, dude. That shit is
As
hilarious.
viewers, we generously over correlate the
Right.
two streams to try to make sense of them.
Yeah, those, and you can see their voices, and like it's not right, but it feels right when you look at it. You're like, that's exactly
Yeah,
what that person said.
right.
And that's what's crazy is, I mean, you've seen those. I'm sure you've seen those virtual where they can recreate someone's face on another person talking. Dude,
Yeah.
those are getting weird. Those like, and I know that those are
I,
only gonna get more advanced. I don't know how people are gonna distinguish it. Like now, it's still pretty. You can tell still, but like, I've seen some ones where it's like, damn. And pornography
yeah.
is pushing that stuff hardcore. I'm sure.
Oh my gosh, that's gonna get a lot of people into trouble or cause a lot of lawsuits. I just watched like a snippet of The Office where everyone's face was Kevin.
Oh my god.
It was so good, and it was really good. It's like this technology has come a long ways.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the technology has come a long ways. I mean, I remember when we were in grade school or something. I found we was 28.8K modems, right? And then I remember finding a 56K modem because my dad would just bring. You remember that giant bin of electronics my dad had?
Yeah, you guys had the coolest like computer
He
lab basement growing up.
Yeah, he just would bring all this hardware down, all this like it's all legacy stuff that's he said it was being thrown in the trash of John's controls or something. And so he'd just bring them home, and I would be able to like build a whole new computer with all these different parts, you know, and like everything was needed, everything I ever needed was there. It was crazy. He just kept bringing them home, and I was just like able to, you know, set it up. Apple Talk, Warcraft 2. Tides of Darkness, Doom 2. Now that's a game that's a perfect example of how you can create an industry based on an open source platform, right? Like
Right.
Doom 2, they fostered that community of like, here's a multiplayer, like here's an actual network based 3D game. Here you go at it,
Mm,
people, right? And it just
right.
like, and there's unthinkable like that not it was like way ahead of its time already, and then they released it for everyone to use, and it's just like, whoa.
The engine was open sourced.
I don't know if the end.
It was
I
open.
think the networking engine was. I know that.
Okay, because like Quake had a strong
Quake,
engine
yeah.
going for a while,
I
but
think
I was too
Quake.
young to realize if that was or to care if that was like
I think
monetized or if that was open.
Quake 2. Yeah, Quake 2. I think was Doom 2, right? I mean, and or maybe it was Quake 1 was Doom 2.
That
They were
sounds
they were the
familiar.
same engine. Quake ended up being the engine that they would use, from that. But now there's a new Doom game, so I don't know. I don't know. I had half a mind to get it, but I don't. I
Mm.
I don't know. It seems like it's more like the older ones. I see the big balls of red balls with those crazy eyes, and what are those things called? I'm sure there's some Doom nerds that know what I'm talking about.
I just remember the Mancubus. Remember that guy? Yeah, like two Gatling guns. He's
Yeah,
just ready to go.
and he was like a goat or something, or he had like a goat face.
Ooh, probably. I mean, there was some goat insignia all over the walls and stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of like Satanist type, like right. It was like you're in hell. Isn't that what? I mean, isn't that what the tagline of the game was? Like something about going into hell or something about I don't know,
Oh,
the
something
underworld.
like that. it was like I remember that was like pretty mischievous as a kid. You know, we're playing a game. They're like using the word hell liberally and like
Yeah,
uh,
Doom.
Doom.
I
Yeah, it was just
remember we playing
it got a
Doom.
bad rap.
It did
You
get
know,
a
it got
bad rap,
accused of starting like some of those big Columbine, like the Columbine school shooting, and like it just
right?
drew
Yeah,
bad associations.
it's
But it was pretty
everyone was trying
alternative.
to. They still blame that shit on there. I've like saw a governor like a few months ago that blamed video games. You know, it's like, dude, we're done with this. Like this, it.
And,
I don't know. That's the way I looked at it. Is like we know there's deeper issues in this. Like the but the I remember I wrote a paper in high school. Like I did a persuasive essay on why video games are actually beneficial, that like they should be seen as like cognitive games like anything else, like or cognitive like no one's gonna go if you do
it's
if you
an
do puzzles
education.
and if you do puzzles and chess every day, people are gonna be like, oh yeah, this is a good kid, he really is, you know, working his brain. But when you think about a video
Right.
game, it's like, oh, that's a waste of time, whatever.
I
But in
mean, when
reality, these are some of the most complex fucking games.
right.
Like if you're a kid and you're playing Dota 2 like all the time, you know how much fucking cognitive like energy you need to put into that?
Right. And
Like
like
man,
chess is confined by the constraints of a physical game, whereas Minecraft is
Minecraft,
like
yeah.
all the problems with is expensive. You
Hmm.
can only have so many bricks. It's hard to inventory them. Like that's a kid's toy that Minecraft is like, hey, no matter how much money you can afford on toys, your family can afford on toys, unlimited bricks. Like, you know, join this fun server. It just like it equalizes the like creative landscape and yeah, lets you go beyond the physical limits. I mean,
Yeah,
you and
people
I
like
played
Minecraft.
Age of Empires growing up. Age of Empires 2 is like still a
Yeah.
cherished game decades
Yeah,
later
it is.
because unlike chess, it teaches you like war strategy, economic strategy. It's just so unlike what we learned in schools growing up.
Yeah,
Not that
honestly,
we need to know war strategy, but
I mean, why not?
it's fun. It was fun and complicated. It really exercised your brain and like your quick response.
Dude, I was playing some AoE. We should play some AoE, of course. But I was playing with my cousin Trent and Shane and some of their friends, and I totally did a maneuver like that just devastated Trent's army. Like I baited him in because of the fog of war. Like he came in with his army, and I had like just a few like trebuchets and catapults or whatever, the onager or onagle, or I forget what they're called.
Oh,
Onager.
oh yeah, Siege Onager, yeah.
And it was, and so they were like, and I was going towards my base and stuff, so he like started to follow that, but I had this other army that I circled around, and then so I had like this barely a good army, like just surviving. Just some of these onagers would be able to get some of them, and then I just pincered him from the back, and I was just like, I totally have done this before in AOE, like when I was a kid, like learn this move, and
Yeah.
yeah, it
Like, where else would you learn? It's like you know, you're learning like deception, and it's like, but it's fun. You're not hurting anyone. It's like
right,
rather
like
than
everyone,
brothers
yeah.
or cousins beating up on one another for fun outside. You know, you can have these complex simulated battles.
And everyone just admits like that they're gonna turn on you. You know, it's just like a joke, like yeah, we'll be allies now. You know,
Yeah,
it's like, but we
right,
know if it's not locked in before the game, then I'm gonna turn on you whenever it's convenient. And
right.
that
Yeah.
shows
There's
you,
some.
like, I
I
bet
mean,
you that's real, man. I bet you that happened. Like that's probably how it works in fucking real world, not in the simulation. You know, imagine.
oh yeah, alliances are pretty fleeting, right? It's an alliance until it's not convenient for one of the two parties.
Right.
When we were kids, Ian, I'm not sure if you remember, but we had our buddy at the rival high school come over to your house with his group of friends and they played us and it was 4-on-4. It was me, you, Shiva, and I think maybe Katie. And they swiftly destroyed us in
Oh
about
yeah,
15
we got
minutes. And it
devastated.
was so devastating. It was such an ego blow that they just got up and left.
Dude, yeah, that's right. They just got up and left. I remember that. They
They
just
like
came.
wiped their hands clean of us and they just left through the front door and Sean just said, hey, thanks for having us.
Wow. I remember that. I think they were just like, oh, this isn't serious. I thought we were gonna have a challenge, you know, like
I know. I felt like we let them down. Like it was a poor show. We were bad hosts for giving them such a terrible performance.
yeah, we should have mixed it up.
That was
But we were
funny.
like, I mean, yeah, we weren't. I mean, I never was really that good. I remember going online. If you remember the All Seeing Eye,
I do.
it's like
Another
before,
great open network.
yeah, before Steam. If you ever, there's some of these games, and there was a network before that too. I forget what it was called.
We were using some tools like Trillion, or no, we were using some tools to make local networks, like to
Oh
virtualize
yeah,
local networks. So we
there's
were
like a
playing
Japanese
games
name of some like a virtual adapter. Dude, yeah.
Trilio. There was Trillion. That was an AIM. That was like a chat multiplexer. It like took all these chat systems and like
Yeah,
gave you one friend list.
and Pigeon would do that too. I remember Pigeon was an open source one. But yeah, what was that? That was really awesome. I remember when it came out and everyone was using it for gaming. Yeah, it created like a virtual local area network. It was a Japanese name.
Yeah, Trilio is not anything. I mean, Twilio. We know Trilio. Twilio is a thing. Ask your
Twilio.
developers.
Um,
Twilio.
Twilio.
Do you know about that?
No, I don't know that.
So as you know, I used to live in San Francisco. I used to live in the Bay Area where it's crazy. It's just like an it's a fantasy land where everyone is focused on like app development and like, tech stuff that they should not be focusing so hard on. And
It's like lots of money and lots of tech people.
it's like critical mass of tech people. It's one of the like best tech hubs in the world. So a lot of the advertising, it's almost laughable to an outsider, but a lot of the billboard advertising there is geared towards developers and like tech people. And so Twilio is a big, it's a web service for like phone communications. They got a bunch of APIs. So like you can make an app and you don't need to worry about any of the complex services of like signing up with your phone number and receiving automatic texts and things like that.
Hmm.
Their billboards for the longest time just said like Twilio, ask your developer. Like
What?
it was just on the extreme end of like Bay Area absurdity. It was just like
That seems like a pretty waste of money, right? Like, I guess until people start hearing about what it is, and then they be like, "Oh, Twilio, I heard of that." I don't know.
yeah, right. You have exactly.
Some like
So they're almost like obfuscating their message or obfuscating like what they are.
I've heard that
Just
like
try to be exclusive or try to cater
yeah.
to developers. It's almost like empowering developers. It's probably making them feel really cool. It's like I'm a developer, I'm a geek, and like if there's something that says like, hey, like want to know what this cool thing is?
Right.
Like, ask.
So you're saying it was like just for some morale boosting? Like they spent the money just to just to like show their developers that they were
And like
they're wizards. See, people need you, you wizards.
right, they're like it's like paying respects to the developers, and then in turn, I think the developers are probably what are driving sales internally at those companies. They're saying to their team leader, like, hey, like, I don't want to develop this. I don't want to make this stuff. Can we use this cool company that makes me feel like a champ on their billboards?
I've heard good things about that company.
Yeah. You see their name around a lot. I've been meaning to ask you about them.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the virtual local area network thing that we did. That it was definitely Japanese. I remember that, or at least a Japanese sounding, like. But yeah, that was a cool little thing. Now it wasn't a VPN, was it? It's like technically, I think it was just some like
I don't
virtual adapter, or like
it was strange. It might have been a VPN, and we didn't realize that we were just connecting to one of their servers' VPNs.
right.
Because I thought it was more ad hoc.
Yeah.
But dude, I wanted to mention this really quick. We were talking about microphones, and I can't remember the guy's name, but one of the earlier inventors of the microphone. There's like a handful of competing companies who are coming out with different microphone technologies and stuff, but one of the earliest microphones was so that we could send voice over telegraph lines. So that's the
Mm-hmm.
birth of the phone lines. And the guy was not a physicist, he wasn't an electrical engineer. He was a doctor who studies human speech
Hmm.
and the vocal cords. And it was this amazing breakthrough because this guy had two sides of the puzzle down. He he am I thinking of just Bell himself?
Could be. I mean, I
Uh,
feel was it Bell Labs? I mean, that's what I was saying. I thought that they were the first people to do like the first speech encoding.
I might have been, yeah, but I mean, they're looking at the vocal cords and seeing visually how obviously that these are vibrating. It's almost like a string instrument with this
Right.
like diaphragm compression beneath it, and so they're saying, they have this early insight into speech and voice and sound is a superposition. It's a summation of a bunch of different frequencies.
Right.
It's just and the phases and they're shifting and the composition is always changing. There's a lot of room for expression using these frequencies. But he said, hey, we can send telegraph beeps on this line. That's just a frequency. That's just a tone. Beep 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 beep. And so that's an alternating signal that's not sent through varying pressures in the air. It's sent through varying electron pressures through a wire. But he said conceptually they're the same thing. You got electrons that you're smushing together in a wave, and you've got the air. And so if I can put a single tone, why can't I send all these tones? And so I just thought that was kind of a neat, like we were talking about like tech innovations and like what
Right.
it takes to like bring it to the next level. And I thought that was cool. It was like, for me, that was a counterintuitive type of person. It was a very like cross-disciplinary reach to get to that next stage in industry advancements.
I feel like
So
that's how.
maybe that's what we need. We need a musician to create the next type of computer.
Yeah. This reminds me. I don't know if a musician would be the right person. I feel like and physicists and people involved in science of like for example, I mean that reminds me of the story I heard about the origin of the internet, which is like one of the biggest, obviously the most revolutionary technology that we know. Like
Yeah.
and that was a similar occurrence of a biology mixed with computer science, where this guy was studying the communicative and like information exchange behaviors of bacteria, and he was modeling them and how they interact with each other and what their protocols are for like, and just observing it. And then he just so happens to have known a computer science guy who was trying to solve the problem of how do I send this info stored here and send it over there, and how with these giant computers that are huge, and
Wow.
so it was this
And
it was
that guy was like, hey, I know how things can communicate quite effectively.
right, yeah, it's like I've been studying this bacteria. And so I mean, and that's what you think, like people talk about the internet being like an organism almost, and it's like how it looks like as a network and everything. And it's like, well, and same with microphones and everything, like we give people, we model this stuff after what we see in reality. Like I don't know, they're artificial, but I don't know, I think the limit goes as far as what physically exists. Like I don't know if humans are capable of creating something that's, things are artificial, but they're still made out of natural things. Like they're synthesized and stuff. But
Right.
I don't know. It's
Ian, something that like has been I've been like mulling over in my mind the past couple months with like politics and stuff. I don't want to like
it's a
get into
dire strait
politics,
in
but
politics right now, man.
it's a what?
It's a dire strait.
The dire strait. Well, something I just wanted to mention is like, well, okay, you know how like ant colonies, like it's almost like it doesn't do them service. It's a disservice to ants to study them as just an individual. You
Right.
their species is has transcended the individual. It can't live as an individual. It needs the queen. It needs the cooperation between like military ants and worker ants and like drones. And um, so I was like, okay, that's really cool. And as I was studying ants a little bit more, I think I watched a cool documentary or something.
You should send me that. I
They're talking.
freaking love ants.
I showed it. Yeah, it was a couple hours of ants, and
Great.
they talk about how they communicate with chemical sense.
Hmm.
And so like here we are, we've been communicating vocally for so long, but all of a sudden we've hit this lightning fast age of communication where we communicate through our ears and our eyes, through video calls, through memes, through like these ultra sparse, like effective bundles of communication. We've all of a sudden just fast tracked how much data,
Hmm.
how many messages, and how much meaning we can send from one person to many or many to one. And so I'm like, yeah, like human beings in the past century, we've started on this path of becoming way more like a colony. We are this one big entity. And so I just see that as like an effective argument of like, I don't know, like why we should put more emphasis on like social services and just, and even just with this virus, like how obvious it is that like we're all in this
Right.
together. The individual's health, affects those next to him, like, those in their community. So I don't know. I think it's great to take a step back and look at the internet as just the next evolution of phones, and phones be the next evolution of telegraph, and telegraph,
Right.
just like, yeah, where is that going? And not only what does that mean for us on our individual lives, but just how will we change as like a species?
Someone said, I don't know who it was, but they said something like human technology is just us discovering our own limitations of who we are. And it's like a rediscovery that like that's like the fall from grace. And we're going to go into some crazy territory now, but like the idea was like humans have existed for a long time, right? Civilization has existed for much longer than people have originally thought. Like when we grew up, it was like Sumerians, Babylonians. They were like the earliest things. But now we know we know that the writings of like Plato and stuff were true, that they were talking about ancient people from, 20,000, 30,000 years ago, and that these were highly advanced civilizations that still, now we have like, I'm sure you've heard of the Potbelly Hill in Turkey, Göbekli Tepe or whatever, that it's like a buried civilization in a hill. They thought it was just a hill, but it's like dirt from a quarry down like a mile away that was like brought and buried. This, like, all these megalithic structures were buried, and now we have satellite imaging and these like LiDAR and shit that we can. But anyway, so the point is we're older than we've been, and there's these people that we look up, like Plato. Oh yeah, he's right about this and this and this and this. But yeah, no, what he's talking about ancient people, that's ridiculous. But now we know this stuff is true, and so this one guy, I forget who he was like a hermeticist or like a theosopher. And he was saying that humans fall from grace is like this life cycle of humanity, that humans were advanced and knew that our consciousness was dipping down, and that we were like lowering down in frequency for the next great age of like 20,000 years or something, or whatever, or 10 to 20,000 years, and that the only way to like keep people aware of what they're under of like stuff is to build these giant pyramids and things that could survive 20,000 years,
Right,
to like
right,
let humans
right.
know what the beacons are of like, oh wait, what is that, and to keep them aware. And so it's
Or
just, it's,
religion. You can make an argument that
yeah, all
religion,
these
the frameworks
stories.
of religion and the teachings,
Yeah,
that is a similar, maybe the Egyptians were earliest in trying things out, and they're like, yeah, we want to make something that's long lasting. Should we do a
right.
scroll, or should we do like a huge sculpture?
Well, think about it. Like, yeah, we have all this bits of data, and this video is being live streamed, right? And it's being encoded, and it's storing on my hard drive. It's storing on multiple clouds. Like, but it's going to be, what is that? Like, unless you have a way to decode it and decrypt it, there's no one's going to be able to watch this in the future without the technology. Like, there's no way to encode this video into, well, as far as we know, that'd be pretty crazy if you can encode video in on like rock or something. But the point of what I was saying is, like, when you're talking about this evolution of human consciousness in a way where, like, I've like just combining that with us become like the internet, us becoming aware of our own, like we're more aware that we're a global person now. Because when this shit happens, I can call my friends in France and Switzerland and talk to my friends in Germany and stuff, and they're doing the same thing. They're worried about the same things. They're worried about this virus. They're worried about whatever it is. And we all have this common connection, and we have this shared experience of this, where we are this, it's the awareness is growing. The awareness of this superorganism is growing. Whereas, like, does the ant even know? I don't know, dude. I gotta invite you. I said, does the ant even know? Like, I gotta invite you to this ant Facebook group, dude. Someone sent this to me. I think it was Anthony. I forget who it was, but it's just people post pictures and like give it a caption, and then everyone replies with like the same reply, and they do it in that like vaporwave stuff where like they have a space in between every thing. So like, here's like a tasty snack I found. Quick, bring it to the queen. And then everyone in the comments just goes, lift, carry. Like, and it's just like, there's just hundreds of them. I forget who it was.
Someone eventually take the role as the queen.
Well, people try to, it's tough in all the comments. Like, usually the person who posts it can they have, so I don't know if it's an exceptionally good caption or exceptionally good like comment, like where they say they're the queen and like they have some, and it's really hilarious. But I don't know, dude. I've been getting into these memes of crabs and ants and like fish and stuff, of like seeing these animals as human, anthropomorphizing them and seeing their qualities as human, like all the crabs at the bottom of the crazy crustacean memes or something, it's like, you can even meme these crabs, and I mean that, and
their expressions communicate human emotion. Can like,
right? We can use those as tools of communication to, and I think you're right, man. I think I wonder what the next thing is, right? I guess it's this maybe Neuralink type things where it's the direct to brain, right? Where you can just like, you can download like thoughts, where I mean, where it's in the Matrix and shit, but I don't know if we're there now, but you got to start somewhere. Like,
yeah, I mean, one that reminded me of a couple things. One of them is the movie Videodrome. Have you seen that?
Videodrome?
Videodrome. You would love it. Check it out. It's
I gotta write that down.
It was released in 1983.
Oh yeah.
So it's an older one, but it's like talking about it's about like TV kind of like used as like a brainwashing tool.
Is it just called video? Oh yeah, one word, Videodrome.
Videodrome. It's like TV being used as a brainwashing tool, and it's really over the top, and it's like unrealistic in a lot of ways. It's like sci-fi horror.
Yeah.
But I love this early sci-fi that was like
the 80s,
before the internet. It's like they're just like, this is before internet. So like William Gibson, his novels, they're kind of like Neuromancer. They're kind of like predicting the internet, and like what you said, where you're like wearing these headsets and you've got these virtual links, kind of like virtual reality. But I like that this is like a step back, maybe a decade earlier. And, for academic reasons, you watch this and you're like, whoa, that's pretty insightful about like what advertisers can do to like just implant messages and, implant ideas, implant actions in us.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, I got to check that out because I love those old 80s sci-fi horror. Like, have you seen? I think we watched it in high school. Lawnmower Man,
Oh, was he going after like zombies with a lawnmower?
no,
Or
dude.
am I thinking of a different one?
I'm pretty sure Lawnmower Man was this like guy who like was hit with a bunch of acid and like mutilated, but then he ended up being like really strong, and then some like scientist who was working on things like brought him in and like had him mow his lawn, and then he was like mentally handicapped and physically like scarred from this acid that fell on him when he was a kid, and then but then his body like grew into some weird like he was really strong but really stupid, and then this computer scientist guy brought him in and started doing tests on him because he's just the like retarded lawnmower guy, this, and brought him in and then started getting him all these video games and like virtual realities, and like started brainwashing him with these virtual realities, teaching him things, and then he became like a superhero, like super smart, super quick, super like he was able to train his brain with these games and with these.
Let me guess. There was a backdoor and someone is using him for evil.
I don't remember how it ends. I think it's him coming to some like Lawnmower Man. Yeah, he starts to become mad with his own power, I think, and then he has to like, and then he gets faced with his own shadow, in some way where he's like realizing what he's become.
And where he has to make decisions for himself rather than programmed into him.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's one of those things, but yeah, that's a great 80s, but I got to check this Videodrome out.
I think you'd like it. It's cool, like counterpoint to the advancement of communication for all the good that fast, quick, effective communication brings us. It can be used by evil, like a corporation can use it and manipulate us.
This was scored by Howard Shore.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Dude, he did the Lord of the Rings. Like, that guy's amazing.
It's solid. There's like a all-star team behind Videodrome.
Oh, he's Canadian. Damn.
Yeah.
They're all Canadians. The Fly too.
Well, we're already beyond the point of getting too nerdy, like.
Dude, this is a.
Have you ever read the book Snow Crash?
No.
Okay, it's written by Neil Stephenson. But it's a pretty out there book. It's a sci-fi novel. I think it's from the 90s. But it talks about these like the Babylonians. There's a lot of like Babylonian history in it, and they're talking about language and like how it almost has to do with like some of these like wizard concepts of like if you say something by its true name, you can have like more control. You can have more control over something, and
that's the Atlantean myth too. That the Atlantean language, you would say that. Yeah, you would. I think Tower of Babel, right? That's the idea of language in Western and Middle Eastern theology and like history, is that Tower of Babel was everyone had a universal language, right?
Right. And that's the true language. Like, and now it talks about how like languages can converge, languages can share elements and get similar. One language might be like Latin might be absorbed into another language, and it's kind of we're trying to find these more effective. And now we've got like meme culture and things like that. We've got additions to how we communicate that make it more and more effective. And Snow Crash talks a lot about language and like information theory or like communication theory and like and using that as like means to control people. It also talks a lot about like dystopian America where like capitalism has turned into like, I don't know. It's a really interesting early take on sci-fi. And
I feel like most sci-fi like that is like, it's all prophetic. Like some of that stuff, they're just ahead. They're just like extrapolating. Okay, what's happening now? How could this be used 20 years from now? Like 1984 is like a manual now, like, like propaganda. There's a book written by, Jung's nephew or whatever, with Freud's nephew. And like, it just talked about how you can use Freud's or Jung's psychology to manipulate people, you know. And it's like that it's going to exist. It's not like that person invented it, right? It's like it's not like Orwell invented these ideas of Big Brother and doublethink and stuff like that. Like he's just he's just giving us a language and some like context and some story and how we can understand it, because everyone knows that that stuff is pretty much real now. Like you read that book, and you're like, this is what's happening right now. Like
what is it, like the Ministry of Thought, or like what's the one that does the news alterations?
The Ministry of Truth.
Truth.
Yeah, dude. Gosh. And it's the Ministry of Peace is actually the war, you know, the Patriot Act.
Everything is a contradiction.
Orwellian double think or double speak or whatever. You hear that constantly, and politicians do that. Like, you know, and I think you're right, man. Like now you're talking about using these things in these information war, because everyone's bombarded with these little bursts of information. And I think now all war is fought psychologically, economically, you know, and biologically. Like, I don't think there's no room for, everyone's so connected. I just feel like people are like, oh, is there going to be another civil war? It's like, I don't even think there'd be another world war unless infrastructures really collapse. Because like, because you can just call up some person in China. But then again, you know, China has, you know, unless a country goes super rogue.
The Great Firewall.
Right, you know? Like the Great Firewall. But, you know, like that, if you really, you know, we're economically tied to each other, but, you know, I'm not an economist.
I think that's like the best thing. As long as we're economically tied, it kind of like the ants, like you're all of a sudden dependent. The one drone is dependent on the queen, you know, or the military element. Like if there's a dependence there, you could never live. You know, the country couldn't live independently.
But do you think ants have do you think they have those built-in ideas of caste and class, like the movie Ants? Like that, like, do you think they have some? I mean, they're just these very simple expressions of a little nervous system, right? So they don't have little computers on them. They're tiny little computers, right? Like they don't have, not each individual ant doesn't have, as far as we know, like you're saying.
They might have class solidarity. Their sensors might really love and appreciate the other ants that look and feel and smell just like them, and they might kind of look out for one another.
Right.
Maybe not on a cognitive, like big picture level, but maybe just on the surface level, they're just kind of like, it's ad hoc.
I've read Kant. I've read Karl Ant Marx. No, I wonder about
what you did there. I'll acknowledge that.
I was trying to think of it. No, I used to watch ants all the time growing up. I was obsessed with ants. Like,
to clarify, that's under a microscope, or that's under a magnifying glass. That's not the movie.
Not the movie.
Wasn't there?
I like the movie too. Ants the movie was better than A Bug's Life, I thought. I mean, A Bug's Life was cute and like it was funny, but I thought Ants was like, I don't know. It had more impact on me as a kid.
Ants was scary at times, and it had a love story going on.
Yeah, it's kind of and it was Woody Allen, goofy Woody Allen, like being the worker, you know, and looking, you know, like this guy. It's a classic story of a guy in a class that's trying to get, you know, he's trying to move class, and he's just, you know, this hero's journey of this, the unassuming person thrust into a situation and seeing what they're made of, right? And then, but he had that. It was pretty funny. I thought it was a little more gritty and risky than A Bug's Life. Obviously, A Bug's Life was just that, you know, a Pixar. Bug's Life was pretty scary too, at the point of with the grasshoppers, the locusts. Yeah, like that. Some of that stuff really spooked me when I was a kid.
Yeah, but you're totally right about ants. Like they got into some pretty deep concepts, like social
concepts,
social class.
Yeah.
Ian, you mentioned like just how we're in this age of like information warfare, countries trying to
Infowars.
manipulate Infowars here on Infowars.
.com.
Countries, no, don't go
Don't go
there.
there.
Like countries trying to like kind of like infect or like meddle with one another's affairs. To go back to that book Snow Crash, they also talk a lot about like information immunization and how like it's also there's a lot of religious talk in the books. Like I'm not religious, but I'm fascinated by religion, and they talk about how like religious scripture and like teachings, how like a lot of that is immunization so that a rival religion doesn't indoctrinate you, doesn't convert you.
Wow.
And like how these religions or language or societal constructs harden us and defend us. So like we're in this new world of communication. I think we need some new immunizations and some new like cultural tools to like defend against like international meddling with elections and things like that. I don't know what they would be, but just
dude, that's fucking mind blowing. The idea that the idea of information immunization, information immunization. That's really cool concept. That makes perfect sense though. Like how else would you hardening people from? Because
I mean, I can harden you right now, Ian. Like okay. Say you were a child. Say you. Yeah, Ian. Hey, baby. Are you hard yet? I was okay. I was.
Sorry, this never happens.
Say you just got off a spaceship and you had no context for the Earth and how humans behave. I could tell you, hey, Ian, don't touch the hot stove. And that information that I've conveyed to you immunizes you against like the attack of someone being like, Ian, touch the stove.
Right.
So education is like about equipping people with these tools and also immunizing people, giving people street smarts, common sense.
Education is just information immunization. That's crazy.
Yeah, and like this Snow Crash book, it makes that comparison that computer geeks love, where they talk about the human brain as kind of like a computer, and think of like how computers they follow instructions. Computers take just a long list of instructions and they just go like ding 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 ding. Well, they were talking about information as just this queue of like sequential input output, sensing and acting. Like you are this computer where you load information in your brain, and the order and the timing is important. And these, if you can get that immunization information in there, then you've blocked out that attack vector going forward. So yeah, I thought it was an interesting perspective when you're thinking about like humans as like a larger organism, and with religion being or all sorts of like cultural rules, cultural norms being like the scaffolding that can support that.
Because I've been saying this to people, and like I've felt this about how our generation with the internet and with this global awareness. I mean, there was global awareness before. I think like probably World War I and World War II, like that's probably when things really started. But the internet, went, like you said, a long distance call. That probably made a huge leap forward in like the global awareness of being like a global citizen and being a person of, where we're all going to work together as a globe. Right. And, and it seems like that's the only, I don't know if nation state can translate to global state. You know what I mean? I don't know. I was just watching this.
Wait, also, what do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Like in its system, like how it's built. Like I was watching this. I was watching this guy who was talking. It's this Italian guy who's talking about the structures and sociology and psychology of civilization, and how cities were made, and how cities actually were the first nations, and that like the order and the hierarchies and the value systems and structures of how resources are shared and stuff in a city is actually like grew into these nations, and that like and So, and I got to go back into reading this guy because it was really fascinating, but I only watched like a little bit of it. But
It reminds me of cellular biology with like
mm,
a single cell organism. You know, you have the power plant of the mitochondria, which used to be its own entity that kind of was absorbed, and like, you know, nations might be these like cellular building blocks, but you know, maybe now they've even all conjoined where the,
right.
you know, the building block is more the nation.
Yeah, that's what I could think of, like the idea the idea that I don't know how it evolves forward. Like if you move forward, everyone has to reach this point where you become more like the ant, right? Like you become more.
You
It's
lose
just
individuality, but you have camaraderie.
yeah. I don't know if it's like fully like the ant where you lose the individuality because I think humans are we do have that element of individual like autonomy in certain sense, but I mean, there's been plenty of sociological studies when groupthink and mob mentality, like that's real. So like maybe I think we're in this weird spot where we have multiple computers in our brain that are doing different things. You know what I mean? And like
Yeah,
the ant might only have that one simple machine, whereas we have this extra prefrontal cortex that's like doing all these extra things, and we have we have an ego and a persona and we have our subconscious, but then we also have the collective consciousness, which like
right.
everyone's tying into. And that's something that I've been looking into and studying more recently is about like the stories you're talking about, the religions and stuff, these stories and these myths and how they're the programming, the software of the culture, and how like you were talking about, we need these new immunizations, and I guess to complete the thought I was saying earlier, like about I've been feeling like our generation, because of all these changes, you look at these social structures and the religions have fallen, right? Like
We're
atheism,
ill-equipped, right?
atheism is on the rise everywhere, or like non-theism or agnosticism and stuff. Like people are rejecting religious institutions, right? Maybe like there's still a lot of really spiritual people, but it's become a more democratized, more individual type thing. But I think it has to, so maybe with the internet, it's, I don't know, it just feels like there's this void, right? Like there's this like void of institution that, because things are shifting. And so like,
Can I jump in really
yeah,
quick?
go for it.
There are like two ideas that I wanted to float by you. Like for me, one, in this newfangled structure in this institution, I would love to have like scripture or teachings on how to protect our data and data privacy, like, you know, some standards.
Truth.
So a company can be adopt this, you know, let's maybe not call it a religion, but this new structure, this new framework, this like social framework where,
Could be
you know, they if
laws.
they follow that, we can trust that, yeah, they're compliant. It's kosher, you know. It's like, we can trust that they're doing right by our data. And then another one is e-waste.
Hmm.
Like, you know, I'm not big enough, you know, we as individuals, we aren't big enough to like make sense of things. I think like part of growing up, like kids movies touch on this, like growing up, you start to realize that like right and wrong is not even like cut and dry,
Yeah.
but sometimes you can't tell right from wrong. Like you can't tell good from bad. You might buy an electronic car, but the car might be poorly designed, only has a
Right.
5 year life, and then the battery is e-waste for eternity onward. Like, so I
Right. And it
would love for,
hurts people by doing it, and like or like it was made with slave labor and
right,
shit. It's like this hurt people.
faultless mind,
Yeah.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
so
I agree, dude.
I see that like where religion kind of fell off, I could see, yeah, that group think, that like hive mind stepping up to fill in some of those gaps. Because
Well,
right now we're on a fast track, you know, with global warming, the carbon emissions is, I think, is very similar to like the plastics waste we produce, like
right.
landfill and just these like toxic elements that we're just putting back in the dirt.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree when it comes to, especially with data privacy. I mean, man, that I forget who it was. My friend Anna sent me a video of this guy who's the long dreads, and I can't remember his name, but he has a bunch of TED Talks, and he's like a bigger guy, and he looks,
His hairline is like full
yeah,
back.
and
Okay.
but he's got like long dreads, and he talks about, he really put it in perspective to me about how unfair everything is, and how like ridiculously exploited everyone is in this digital age, and about how people are like, especially Americans, we don't own anything that we create. That like our data, everything that you do on your phone, on your computer, everything is all being watched and monitored by like 10 to 20 probably different organizations at the same time. Your internet service provider is monitoring it and selling it. Google is monitoring it, selling it. Facebook is like,
A lot of people are like, hey, I'm not doing anything bad. Why does it matter? But they're collecting metadata on all your actions. And we have to have enough humility to understand that at this moment, I might not think I'm doing anything wrong, but like they're tracking our lives in more detail than we could track our own lives. So they're
right.
going to see trends and exploit trends in us. They're going to be more in tune with our behavior than we are. It's like, it's all, to me it's like you're going to see a therapist who is exploiting you. They're learning your deepest darkest secrets, and they're somehow exploiting it.
Right.
Not
So
saying
they're
like
like,
companies are,
"Oh, come back
oh,
next time." Yeah, they know all your complexes, and they feed into it and make it so you come back next time. Yeah, I mean, but not even that argument, because I think people hear that argument and they're like, "Oh yeah, but what can you do?" And like,
what are
well, what does that help me? Like, how does that help me? Like, it's kind of this like, "Oh, I'm not hurting," but the argument this guy was giving was a monetary argument, was that you own, like, you should own your data. You should own your, like, you should be able to whatever you do on your phone, all of your activity, if that's being monetized, how come I'm not getting a dividend? How come I'm not getting nothing back if I'm contributing to this, and that's because it's just kind of opened up. And like, there's a famous quote of Mark Zuckerberg who's like, people just gave me all their data. Like, they just gave it to me. Like, I just said, hey, sign up here. And they just gave all their personal information, all what they do, their habits, their behaviors, their, their friends, what they're into, what they like everything that you'd ever want from a marketing, team, like to target you. Like, they just gave you a blueprint of personality, of, like it's, and so the idea then is like, okay, well, the idea is, there needs to be a system, like you're saying, if there's these laws where not only is our data private, that maybe it's encrypted or anonymous, or that we can have complete control over our digital footprint, that we know exactly what's going out, and we know exactly how it's just like a privacy settings on Facebook, right? You can go and be like, make it all public to the thing. I don't care. Or only make my friends allowed, like,
put us in control, and yeah, pay us our cut. Like,
yeah, pay me my fucking money, bro. Because like,
I don't know if I was with you. I was listening to this podcast about the concept of a repugnant transaction. Have you heard of that?
is that when
Have you heard that phrasing?
both people don't like it, or no?
I've got an example. It's
I've heard someone said this the other day.
like buying an organ from someone to sell on the black market. That's repugnant because the person might be like $100,000 for a kidney. Yeah, any day. But like, but and it's weird. It's this gray zone because like they're a consenting adult. Like both parties feel like they're benefiting. Prostitution is another one. Selling your body for sex in exchange for money. It might be a consensual thing, but society kind of thinks that, like, there's this taboo there. It's repugnant. It's like it seems like there's exploitation going on, and so it reminded me of that. Like when you're saying companies like Zuckerberg just amassing people's data, that's like this ultimate repugnant transaction where because we are either unaware of how it's happening or how much is being taken or the meaning or the value. I don't know what my spleen does for me, but I'm glad there's people looking out saying, no, you can't buy Ray's spleen. You cannot offer him, that's
Right.
repugnant. Like,
Right. There's
we
laws
should
against.
know how every part of our body or our entity or our data, our being, like, benefits us. I think, yeah, that acceptance of that being like repugnant and us putting up laws to defend that. I think that's part of that scaffolding that we'll need to develop.
And I don't know what triggers something like that, man. I have no idea, because it just feels like there is just so much monopoly right now that, and there's so much consolidation of power and influence that, like, how do you, I mean, I get the only solution I could think of, because in Europe, at least, the EU has higher privacy laws. Like you can at least go and, like, you don't own it per se, like you get a dividend on what you do, but you at least have, it's at least private, and you can like remove yourself from things, and you can like inquire business, like the EU requires Facebook and Google to tell you what they're collecting, and like they have to have a record of it. And like I think that's the beginning. That's a good start. Like, but we don't even have any of that, dude. We're not even close to that here, dude. It's just like fair game. Like I remember right after the last election when Trump got reelected, like Congress unanimously, like other than like 2 or 3 senators.
Reelected?
No, no. When he got elected.
Tell me you're not calling from the future. No.
I mean, that's not looking good either, man. But the I think actually I might have been, wait, when was that? I was in New York City, I think, or something. And I saw on the subway a sign of like from an internet activist group. It was a subway sign that showed all the names of the senators, and there was like 3 senators who voted no. And this is basically just allow ISPs to like get all your data, and then they up the price too, right? And give you lower speeds. It's like it's just ridiculous, man. And how much this like intellectual property, these intellectual property laws are in every industry have just become ridiculous. Like I'm just thinking about what's happening now with COVID and how many people are patenting vaccines, and like hearing about all these vaccine wars, of like these patent wars of like people suppressing other patents and suppressing other technologies because their patents in Bayer, or the patents in Monsanto in the agriculture industry, or like whatever it is. And in music, it's the same way. Like now these giant labels have lawyers that go and like pretend like they own a major triad or something.
It's crazy to me that like capitalism relies on conflict, the churning conflict, whereas like at times like this, we need to be cooperative. Like, people are donating resources and time and money to hospitals and stuff right now, and there is cooperation, don't get me wrong, but like, I would like to see, I'm just curious, like, communism, I'm like you see that, and like that, yeah, that structure of government is able to like produce a lot of like atrocious crimes, but one aspect of it that's interesting is it can kind of move as a singular entity, and it can kind of like act swiftly. Again, they're more immunized against head-on threats like a COVID.
Like China can say everyone stays home. I mean,
yeah, you're staying home.
Yeah, dude, I saw videos of like autonomous robots. Did you see that? Autonomous robots going.
We're going to be on a registry for the rest of our lives.
I'm wondering if they're going to take this stream down. They just hear people talking about Zuckerberg and data privacy, and then they just shut it down. No.
Yeah. Can I mention one last thing about data privacy? Or if you want to keep it going, but
yeah, absolutely.
Have you heard of the book Who Owns the Future?
No.
It's a pretty good read. It talks about like the advent of the network age, and how before the internet, Walmart was the first to start like collecting data from
Dude, that's the guy. That's the guy I'm talking about. Jaron Lanier.
He's amazing.
This is the guy I'm talking about.
And that's hilarious because again, it definitely resonated with me.
Jaron, is that how you say it? Jaron?
Jaron Lanier. I don't know. But one of the examples
computer
that he gives
philosophy
is,
writer. Wow. Classical music composer. Man, this guy's a G. Founding father of virtual reality.
Ian, he
founded Atari. What the fuck?
He founded Atari.
He found an Atari.
He founded Atari at Goodwill. Haven't we all?
No, he
Okay,
left
so
Atari. He worked at Atari.
one of the real world examples he gives is Spotify, where they're amassing all this wealth of data and like information from a bunch of individuals and kind of like this amassing that wealth in a silo in a relatively small company within Spotify. And he talks about like imagine a world where our computer vision is so good that we could use surveillance cameras to monitor the behavior of nurses everywhere or caregivers, and then we create a robot army, a robot fleet of caregivers, and use the habits we learned from skill caretakers to train the robots. And that data, we never paid those caretakers for training the robots, for giving their life's
Mm.
labor, their amassed skill set and their mastery of their trade, and we never paid them for that. It's like we asked to shadow someone at their job for years and never compensated them or thanked them.
Yeah, but we had like 5 microphones and 10 video cameras and supercomputers reading all of
Right,
it. Like you're not even allowed to
right,
have a calculator and a test in college, you know? Like
right.
have these that's a great point, man. It almost seems like at this level with the internet and all, like, and with this level of computing and stuff, it's like the monetary incentive system in capitalism is like eating itself. It's like
Mm,
it's getting to a point where it's so ridiculous, like ridiculously efficient to like create these things that would before then cost all this value and labor, but now it's like
right,
you can just take a snapshot of it and have it, and you take a picture of it with your phone, and then boom, now you can replace a whole industry. Like I remember talking to our friend Ben, and he's a guy at Anheuser-Busch, and he was saying about, this is just anecdotal, I could be mishearing him, but I've heard this in other industries too, is that as soon as as soon as those autonomous trucks go, like it's as soon as they're okayed, we're talking about the entire fleet of all the trucks, can be phased out as soon as possible. And
right,
maybe
right.
it's a good thing in a lot of ways. Obviously, there's still huge social and economic and political ramifications that's going to happen, but like a lot of the fossil fuel emissions, a huge chunk of them, if the majority, a plurality of things come from
Mhm.
from semi trucks. And so like now we're going to have these, more renewable battery powered ones where, yeah, I mean, there's ecological and biological impact from the mining of lithium, right? I've heard that. But like, I think the net carbon emission is definitely way lower. And when you have renewable, it's a much more efficient and sustainable long-term thing. But
Yeah.
that's just one little example. Like you brought up a great example of like of the nurses. I wouldn't even think about something like that. Like, I guess I mean, it's
That's
our,
kind of like with music now. Like, they're gleaning data and info from musicians all over Spotify.
oh yeah, dude.
You get compensated in some ways, but by being a part of their network and contributing to their network, you're contributing a lot more than just, you're
Absolutely.
contributing your songs, but something more too.
And yeah, I mean, even going to that automation thing and with how technology is like just just shaping industry, and it's just like removing way more and more industry. Like this whole the whole of our system is built on the fact that everyone has to like kind of do drudgerous work in order for civilization to
Right,
go. Like we're all worker ants, right? Like
right.
if we're all but then if there's no if worker ants all of a sudden created cyborg worker ants, and then they don't have to work anymore, what do the worker ants do? Do they
Right. Well, reinvent ourselves
then
or
they got to be
reinvent
like, oh
roles.
well, I'm just gonna make some ant tea and watch some grasshoppers, and or like watch, I don't know, like go at the top of the mound and see where I
I
don't
mean,
know, or maybe they like
I mean,
going and working, they work their own little garden. I don't
I mean,
know.
if we could create cyborg worker humans that are so sophisticated that we don't need to spend our time working to support them and to program them and fix them, then I think that still might even be an ethical dilemma because we're enslaving these creatures that we've made. We have made these comprehensive
Right.
creatures that are self-sustaining, and we are stealing the fruits of their labor.
But
Then I think that's still messed up. So
yeah,
I'm hopeful that we will still be gainfully employed supporting whatever automations we make.
I don't know, man, because I mean, it is an ethical dilemma, but I guess it depends on what level of consciousness these things have. Like
Yeah.
if they look just like a, you know, if they feel and look just like a rotary phone, like, you know, it like do you worry about do you worry about the switches and how they get worn and tear? Like, do you worry about when you look at a hard drive? Are you like, I'm sorry for using the fruits of your labor? Like, I could only imagine how many manuscripts I would have to write.
But the invention of the rotary phone and the hard drive, that didn't put anyone out of work. That in the
Sure,
net,
I bet
that created jobs. You now are saving massive amounts of data to hard drives. Musicians, people in video editing, like the
right.
internet
I've heard that
runs on
argument.
server farms. Like to be able to call someone on a rotary phone, like now lawyers and business people, day traders, so I don't see that as
It
I'm
creates
just
new
like
industry.
I'm
No,
just
you're right. I mean, I've heard that argument too. But it's like, to what end though? Like, when you get so efficient, how
right.
like I mean, I think it was like Andrew Yang who talks about, he talks about this automation all the time, and he was saying, what are you gonna, like, for all those truckers, like when you have an electric car, what are they gonna become? Electric battery? Are they gonna become battery or chemical engineers?
Right.
Like,
You're right. You're
or
right.
is
Like
going to be a whole new
like
wave of
basic income. We should have universal basic income, and I agree. And another example is the native people in Hawaii before European white man came to, American colonizers came to Hawaii. It was like written that the people there worked 4 hours a day, and it
yeah,
was a nice leisurely lifestyle. There was an abundance of resource, so they had the luxury of doing that, living that lifestyle because the ocean brought a lot of nutrients and fish, and like there was great foliage on the island and stuff. So hopefully we can amass enough intellectual wealth
right.
and like that kind of stuff that we can live in our utopia, or you live in this garden that we create for ourselves. So I hear you. I agree.
Yeah, I mean that's the ultimate goal, right? And I don't know. I just think about you're talking about musicians and how many engineers and how much it would take to record an album in the 50s
Yeah.
versus like what I can do now with these microphones. Like I can set up a network broadcast essentially, like the same with these little, like $500 worth of consumer electronics. I can create what people were able, probably even more sophisticated. This is all HD and things too. It's like versus network television where they have they have these giant machines and so many engineers. Like you're talking about all the switch workers, right? Like
Right.
you like all those people are out of work. Yeah, it creates different industry, but like
Like
I don't know if
even
it's I don't
mastering
know if it's like equal.
for vinyl mastering. Like you and Graham were telling me, our buddy Graham, who's another musician, Graham Hunt. Um, we were having this conversation about mastering and how, like, if you're storing your music on a CD versus vinyl, not a CD, but a magnetic tape versus vinyl, you have to master it differently because the qualities of that medium can contain or convey the information with a different fidelity. So like as an electrical engineer, I was looking into making a preamp for a turntable, and it was mind blowing. I was like, oh my gosh, the data that's encoded on the vinyl is actually all scrambled. It's not like scrambled, but it's all distorted and warped so that you have the highest.
Hmm.
It is encoded. It is encoded. It's frequency distorted on the vinyl, and then when you play it back, you restore its original content. You put it through the transverse of what a mastering engineer did to it initially.
Right.
It blew my mind, and I never wanted to touch preamps again.
I was like, Priya, leave that to someone else. Someone else
Yeah,
should.
yeah.
Yeah,
like you were saying, like leave that to software. Now, what you used to have like the, I know people are still mastering things, but it's a different challenge. There's different qualities.
yeah. I mean, there some people just there are automated masterings too, and they're the mastering engineer that I follow, Justin Perkins. Actually, he'd be a good person to bring on this podcast, I think. But he, of course he is very critical of these things. He's like deep in the mastering world, and he works from a spaceship, and he's just like, he got all this gear and stuff, and all these techniques that have been, over the decades been evolving, and all these automated processes that he's doing manually. But a robot can do it like real quick. Like I was saying, just like how I would master my music until 2017 is just throw a Fruity limiter on it. Like this tiny plugin that is 250 kilobytes. And it just, all it does is just maxes all this noise, just makes it really loud. And so like but it works. But putting it on tape, putting it on vinyl, that's a different story. But like digitally mastering things is like, like technically, and I've even done that actually. My 2018 album, I mastered myself too. And I do hear a difference. Like it's a human element in there that can add to music for sure. Like same with the mixing process. It creates it's like a different artistic, like you're saying, like it does.
It's kind of like some finish. It's kind of like in woodworking, that finishing, to give it that gloss.
But it's like
texture.
It'd be like if someone with really good technique of like finishing, like, they know the right ways to polish it up, or instead of someone who like doesn't really knows a little bit about it, it'll get finished. But it's like,
and I'm not like, I think it's an amazing craft. I wasn't saying that was a simple thing. I'm like saying like woodworkers, they know,
of the analogy,
the right way to sand it in the direction of the grain,
exactly.
Different types of woods, and what types of stains and polishes will make that really pop and really look good.
100%. No, yeah, I was just going along with the analogy, but I don't know, man. I don't know where it's all gonna lead, because things just are getting easier and easier, and these is like, one touch buttons that like make things make things sound so crazy. And with all, like you were telling me about, it's not an Arduino, but it's a microcontroller. Teamsy.
Teensy, yeah. If anyone out there is doing Arduino or wants to make music with an Arduino, Teensy is like a hardcore Arduino for music, like digital effects. You could make like synth modules or filters or you can make guitar pedals really easily with it. It's a ramped up Arduino. It's like 1,000 times faster, with a bunch of audio libraries built in.
I should do that, because I've always been looking for a good digital like pedal, and there's so many digital pedals out there that are cheap and like they're crappy stuff, and I just like there's some nice ones for sure, but I haven't found one that's reasonably priced. And I want to be able to like mess with things, and I guess I have an Ableton, like my push can do it through Ableton and stuff, but for like just more analog, just on the go, where I don't have to set up a whole computer, I don't have to do everything.
Yeah. I want to ask what a digital pedal is versus an analog one, but I also have to go to the bathroom. Can I take a quick break?
Yeah, go for it, dude.
Okay, I'll be right back. I want to know what a digital pedal is.
Now it's what's up, everybody? Raymond's taking a little bathroom break. How's everybody doing out there? We got some folks on YouTube. We got Smoky Water Studios saying Yang Gang, baby. And we got Jenny Wolf McCullah on Facebook saying hi, Ray. I'll let him know you said hi when he gets back. We got Aria Pedraza on Facebook saying slurp. Aria, did you show me the ant thing? Or did I show you the ant thing? Oh man, I feel like I discovered it when I was like half asleep or something, and now it's become part of my life. Pretty Beggar on Twitch says, "Yo, your Twitch dynamic follow button is right over Ray's mouth." Well, I hope people click on it then. Q saying on Twitch says, "You guys are really sexy." Oh, okay. Maybe you're a robot. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm just going to assume that you're a well-intentioned individual with keen observation skills. And then on YouTube, we got Alpha Digital Pro saying kombucha is so dope. 100% agree. 100% agree. And then we got, that's the RDS Films on YouTube saying, "Cullah, you rock. Rocky, you rock." Don't tell me I rock when you're the actual rock. That's like saying, "Ray, you..." No, it'd be like, "Kampmeier, you Ray." No, that doesn't make any sense. Never mind.
Thank you, Ian.
Oh, Ray's back. What's going on? How was your bathroom break?
It was relieving. Much needed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's a digital pedal?
Digital pedal, like if you think like an analog pedal, like I don't know. I got the, like here's one I got.
But the interface is digital, or does it still use an analog?
It's just a 1/4 inch in, 1/4 inch out. This is a compressor sustainer that I got used from a friend of the band, the BBs down the street. But it has some noise in it. It's like, it works. It's just a compressor. So I would use it to like go from my keyboard to my interface, so I could like just make it all pop and just be like, okay, boom. I know this signal is going to be solid. And because I would have a mic going in through it too. And so sometimes like the mic was always really sketchy, and so I would use this thing to pop, but it adds a layer of noise then when it's on. And so, like these are just pretty standard, like, they're pretty standard guitar pedals. And so a digital pedal is essentially just the same thing, but it's not just a circuit that deals with, I mean, you know much more about this stuff than I do, but
And I know I'm not like totally ignorant about it. I'm just kind of curious because there's a purely analog circuit where it's done with like op amps, like amplifiers and resistors and capacitors. And
I think that's what this is.
That might be what that is. And then there's like something that's purely digital, where you maybe have like a digital interface, USB, like a USB mixer, But then there's kind of this gray zone because there's like these hybrid circuits where you've got a microcontroller, but then you've got op amp and analog front end that does with all your inputs and outputs. So, I just like touch the surface. I've got like a little like Korg synth in the basement that I monkey around with, but I want to make more, and I want to kind of understand. What's that?
The micro Korg?
No, it's even more janky than
the nano Korg.
It's not even like full Korg.
It's just Korg.
Have you heard of Little Bits? Have you used that like toy or the little like building blocks called Little Bits?
Little Bits, no. That's usually the nickname that my ex-girlfriends give me. No, I'm just kidding.
That's rough.
A little self-deprecating humor.
That's good. So no, it's not anything to do with Ian's genitals. These are...
Whoa. Who talking about genitals?
Okay, I misunderstood. I'm so sorry. So they're like these like Lego bricks. They're these. It's modular. It's a standard for a modular synth. And rather than like Eurorack, where you bolt these panels into a predefined dimension, like the rails.
Yeah, that's what I got.
You've got a rail system?
A small little one. I only have two on the rack, but I was debating getting like a nice reverb one. But they seem so large and unnecessary.
Right, so is yours Eurorack or is it a different standard?
I mean, it's like what you're just. It's like what you're describing. It's just a rack with like four screws that I screw into this like whole panel that goes down, right? And I have like two racks. One's just the preamp that I'm using, and then
Okay.
another is
Is
my
it
interface.
is it like an open standard for the module sizes? Like, do you have to buy them from that vendor, or can you buy them like?
No, they're standard sizes. It's like they either come in like, I think they're about like 2 inches between the 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 actual screws where you screw them in. There's ones that are like double the size, right? That'll take up 2 slots or three
Okay.
slots even, or 4 slots if it's like a crazy thing. But it's like what people, you see like these giant hardware
Chassis.
chassis,
Chassis.
these huge hardware chassis with these like giant, have you ever been to a show or a concert and you just see these things that just have tons of little, like, just this whole racks and racks and racks of different knobs and LED displays and all
Right,
this.
you see what I'm showing?
Oh yeah, that's for modular synths.
Right. So this is Eurorack is for modular synths. I thought that's what you were talking about.
No, I don't know what my actually, I have no freaking idea. But
So,
yeah, I've
well,
never had a modular
this is
synth.
this is kind of where I was going with it. Like, this is been around since I think like the 80s or the 70s. But this is Eurorack, and these are Korg. And oh, I'm sorry. Are you able to see this?
Yeah, dude, this is great.
So Korg teamed up with Little Bits. Little Bits makes a bunch of electronic components that magnetize end to end, and it sends power and audio signal and data and like sensor
I've
signals.
seen
And
some of these. Yeah.
so the cool thing, like Korg got involved, and they said, "Hey, we want to put our name. We want to brand one of your kits and make it all music components." So I saw this, and I'm like, yeah, my niece and nephew, they'll be old enough to I can pawn this off on them as a
Yeah.
gift. But for myself, was on the coffee table, like making
Mm.
tunes. I thought this was a really interesting user interface, and I thought this was an interesting take on modular. It was more playful. It was easier to disconnect things. Where
So
like,
does it have a
you know,
sequencer then? It's just like a sequence, and this runs on a D battery. Wow.
it runs on a 9-volt battery. It's got a sequencer. There's a. Can you see my mouse?
No.
Okay, so the part with 4 knobs, that's like a. I don't know even how to. I
People
don't
can
know
see
the
my mouse
terminology.
though. Yeah, the one
But
right in the middle, like
that's the sequencer.
right below
The
that
one in the middle.
switch.
Yeah, the one below the battery connection is a sequencer, and so you can set the timing of that. You can tell what that sequence's knob, that value should do. Should that adjust the period that it sustains? There's some little bit of configuration, which it blows my mind. So I can just imagine like a young person who's growing up on this stuff, just like eating it, just
Just
eating this up, just
freaking
like
womping it.
yeah. So I've been really
Yeah.
happy. I think Katie and I, my partner and I, have been able to make like some pretty entertaining. We can keep ourselves occupied listening to
Just
this
with
for
some little
hours. So
bits.
I'm excited to like make a little bit more. So I was curious, what the distinction was between like analog and digital, because a lot of these are digital with the analog front end.
Yeah, the digital, as far as I know, is like, the way I was using it was just analog is those classic one switch, bunch of hardware, like, yeah, a bunch of circuits that actually manipulate this data, like old school. And then software is like, it has an LCD display with and it's got actual firmware on it. And, you
Right.
know,
And that's interesting because like you talk about analog like op amps and stuff. They're supposed to have like warmth and these like analog qualities, and that goes back to like tube amplifiers. There
right.
really was this like sense of warmth there,
People
but
still want the tubes, man. Like like
people do.
for guitar amps, and like it still sounds nice. Like if I go grab my roommate's tube amp and I play my guitar through it, it has a completely different sound than it has some noise in it too. But so when you say op amp, remind me again what an op amp is.
Yeah, an op amp, it's called an operational amplifier. It's like a
Operation,
pretty
yeah.
general purpose. So transistors and tubes that were like used in early amps and preamps and radios, those are like non-linear amplifiers. You have to use feedback and you have to make all these tricks so that their amplification is linear, and that cuts down on the THD, total harmonic distortion. So what a tube amp does is it injects its own, warmth, its own like timbre, it's like its own THD. It's trying to be pretty linear, but it also has this flair of a little bit of distortion that gives it that signature sound.
So you're saying
So
the answer is just give it a little THD. Yeah.
you could give, but it has to be tasteful, because like you're saying, like one of your instruments has this digital noise on it, and that's that's going to contribute to the total harmonic distortion, or that's
Right.
it's noise. But
Yeah,
like,
I mean, most tube amps have a noise like built in. They just go like, "How do you get rid of that noise?" It's like that is it. That's the
right,
like
that's a function of that
yeah, like
circuitry.
you're gonna have that. Like there's gonna be some in the back of what it's gonna be, what it's gonna be, because I mean it is distortion, right? Yeah, like so. Wait, so because the tube amp is they always have. I don't know. Do you know how a tube amp works? You kind of described it a little bit there.
It's crazy. They are super inefficient. You have to heat them up
Right.
to get them to function.
You have to wait.
The vacuum in it. You're like launching photons through like a mesh grate in them, and like
Whoa.
it's some crazy physics. Like when we invented the transistor, that must have been so relieving, because the tube amp was previously the extent of that technology, and they were bending over backwards to make that do what society demanded. And
It always looks like an incandescent light bulb.
oh yeah, because it's got like a filament in it.
Filament, yeah.
It kind of is like an incandescent light bulb. It's producing waste light and it's producing waste heat. Granted, this is for music. We not need to be super efficient. Those are kind of
You're trying to
joyful.
stop rock and roll, right?
It's what?
You're trying to stop rock and roll?
I'm trying to stop inefficient rock and roll.
Rock and roll is inefficient.
Power output. If rock and roll could be 10% louder, would you listen?
I think it's already loud enough, man. Like,
Yeah. So the point being is like when we went from tube amps to silicon amplifiers, we were able to turn that volume up from 10 to 11.
from 10 to yeah. Well, now it's just zeros. And what's 10 in binary? Do you know? You don't remember binaries?
It's A. It's hex A.
Hex A. Wow. Yeah. Because you're right. I mean, whenever we start up a tube amp, I remember when I first used a tube amp, I was in college, I think, and I think it was my roommate Pat's tube amp. It was the first time I ever used one, because I just had these crappy 20 watt, Fender thing that was like $20 at Brass Bell, and I would play on that, or I would use direct into the computer and use a digital amplifier, which is I still use to this day. Sometimes it sounds better. Like some of my favorite guitar sounds and stuff are just directly inputting my guitar into my computer, and yeah, the signal is like really quiet, but because these emulators, the software is getting so good, it preamps it, and then it does the same logic.
In your computer, you asked what an op amp was. Your computer that's going to use an op amp. It's going to use a really high frequency, like a good audio quality, very linear op amp. So our sound cards that growing up, and we were plugging that ATX sound card into the slot, PCIe
Sound
or whatever.
Blaster Pro? You're talking about?
All that really is sound cards. That's op amps. Those are linear amplifiers that are taking this. It does two things. It amplifies not only like voltage, the amplitude of the signal, but it can also it buffers. It makes a really high impedance input, and then can drive that signal in a low impedance fashion, so it can propagate into the computer and propagate to the next stage of the circuitry. So like a preamp is a little bit of an amplification factor, but it's more of providing a high impedance, a source that doesn't distort the signal that it's listening to. So an op amp is it's kind of like the transistor replaced the tube. The op amp is a conglomeration of transistors arranged in a novel way that produces a nice linear amplification. across all frequencies.
Yeah, because dude, I'm not gonna lie, I still don't really know the difference between preamps and amps. All I just know is the word like the preamp goes before.
Right, right.
And
Like, did that like shed some light on it?
yeah,
Like,
can
I mean,
you just go a little further in that and explaining what the difference between preamp and an amp then?
yeah, yeah. So they both amplify. So they're kind of like, they're not different beasts. You could link, I don't, you wouldn't want to, but like you could link two preamps, or if you have two amps and one has a higher impedance input, you could use that. If that's the best you've got, you could use that as
And
like a
impedance
preamp.
is the same as resistance, right?
Impedance is the same as resistance.
High
Generally, the
Z.
way impedance factors in the complex element of memory of like capacitance and inductance. So, resistance is like of instantaneous power loss through like a resistor, but impedance is, in the way I'm using it, it's synonymous, totally synonymous, but it's just kind of a word that
Right.
captures more than just resistance. Um, so, and typically at least in electronics, for music, you guys would use ohms?
Yeah.
Would you use resistance for like the would you say about like would you say resistance for the strength of a driving signal or for the receiving end or impedance?
I'd say people use. I'm not really in that world. When I read manuals and I read hardware like forums and stuff, people talk about impedance and they just talk about high or low Z. That's really
Okay.
just it. Like I don't even think people get. I mean, when you get lower level, right? Like the more lower level you get into electronics and into, uh, yeah, that people start talking about that. But like I see it. I still am confused of like what I see it less now. I mean, I've had some audio interfaces there. It's like pad. Like people, they always they change it. It's like, oh, this is a high impedance setting. This is a low impedance setting, and I'm always
Okay.
just like,
I can clear the air then.
one just makes it louder. That's what I hear.
The idea of like impedance matching is that you want your driving signal, you want the source of your signal to be low impedance. There's low resistance. It can push out as much signal as it needs.
Right.
You want the listener, the receiver, the front end of your preamp, you want that to be high impedance, meaning that it doesn't demand a lot of signal. It doesn't require a lot of signal to do its job. It's not being a load on the signal. So when you look at like the pickups on your guitar, or you look at a piezo disc for
Mm-hmm.
an acoustic guitar's pickup, for if you want to put a pickup on your acoustic guitar, those are really sensitive, like weak signals. There's not a lot of like electric pressure driving those. It's not like the speaker cone being driven by your like 100-watt amplifier.
Right.
So that's, it's not a totally weak signal, but it's weak. It's on the weaker end. So you want to complement that with a preamp that's basically just like a wall. It sees the signal, but it's not a leech on the signal. It's not vampirically like pulling and distorting this already compromised signal, this non-ideal signal. So like, um, if you were to plug the output of your computer into the input of a mixer or the input of another interface, you wouldn't need a preamp because your computer already packs a punch with being able to drive at a low impedance output.
Yeah, I can think of a real world example of what you're saying that I have all the time because I bought like a set of 4 little contact mics,
Mm.
little transducers, I guess, that from like eBay like 10 years ago or something. And I have a banjo that I got a few years ago, and I put it in the banjo. And whenever I go to a gig, I always have to tell them, "Hey, man, you got to turn it way up, like way more than you think." Like, like it needs to go all like I've been in gigs and I'm just like, "No, dude." Like, they're like, "I'm not getting any signal." I'm like, "You're getting a signal. Just keep
Oh
going,
wow.
just keep going higher." So, like, essentially, I have
Yeah.
what I need to get is a better DI box, which is like there's these DI boxes that have little power DI boxes sometimes too, where it like balances the signal, and
It's a preamp.
it also has some sort of like little preamp capacity to it. Otherwise, it'd be like put it on a channel that has a preamp, and turn the preamp up. Because I've done that. I have a little mixer and I have like little multiple gain stages on certain channels. And when I put it on there, I can turn the first gain way up and I'm getting a crystal clear signal as opposed to like putting the second gain way up. And then all of a sudden it gets disgusting.
Right. So to revisit like what a preamp is, it's twofold. A normal amp is just about amplification and like just driving high current, high power output. But the preamp is about providing a high impedance high impedance input, so it doesn't distort the original signal. And then it also provides some like adequate minimal amount of amplification to get the signal above the noise shelf, to get the signal
Right.
adequately above the noise shelf. So you've got enough signal to noise to then pass it to your amplification stage that goes, I want 100x or I want 10x with high current amplification.
So how does it determine? So like then I get the conceptually, but like then so how is a preamp then determining, like how is it making different decisions than an amplifier? Like how you know what I mean? Like how does it is it just focusing on the impedance more and so as opposed to the signal?
Yeah, so there's different ways to construct amplifiers and there's different trade-offs. For example, like a circuit that's really good at driving high output, high current or high power speakers, you might have a shoddy input impedance. And I'm just throwing this out as an example. That's not
Sure.
always the case. And amplifiers are so sophisticated now that you generally don't need a preamp in a lot of cases. And I'll explain kind of where I'm coming from with that. But like for your example of the acoustic pickup, they're like as good as amplifiers could get. Like you could have the best audio interface to your computer that has ideally infinite high impedance input. You'd still want a preamp, and the reason you'd want that is you'd want it to minimize the effects, the loading effects of the cable you use, the 20-foot cable you run from your instrument to your computer, because that is going to have resistive effects. And now we get to that complex, memory, capacitance, inductance qualities. It's also going to have inductive effects where it acts as a choke. So it's attenuating high frequency change. And it also has capacitive effects. So it's being loaded in all these funny ways that distort the original signal, make it less tinny, or it just like reduces the fidelity of that original content. So I think you called it a DI box.
Yeah, they're like pretty standard for like guitar, like acoustic instruments, and it's just a way for sound engineers to get random, like just whoever someone comes with some instrument, who knows what kind of pickup they have, who knows what's going on, feed it into a DI box, then they can get a balanced XLR cable coming out of their DI box, and it has like impedance and grounding options and stuff,
Right.
and then
phantom powered.
Yeah, so
that's an ideal case with the pickup with the preamps for the contact mics. Is you also want to reduce the mass. If you're gluing this onto your acoustic guitar, you don't want to have that affect it too. So an ideal case would be like you've got a balanced XLR cable that plugs into a small device that's powered over phantom power, and it's as lightweight as possible. And then then the contact only goes half a foot to
so phantom power can power, because I know it powers microphones.
Phantom power can power preamps.
It's powering
as well.
This mic right here. So really, okay. So because I was the fiddle player in the Copperheads, Joe, he had a DI box that had, because he's got a fiddle with one of these acoustic transducers on it too, and so he had one a little power, and he's like, oh, it's got some phantom power. I'm like, phantom power is only for mics, bro. Like, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh, I don't know. It's just like power. You want to get some power into it. I'm like, yeah, that kind of. I'm like, I should probably look into that. But,
so the phantom power, how a 3-pin balanced XLR cable is 3 wires, right? Ground, signal plus, signal minus, positive and negative. Well, what it does is it applies a consistent DC voltage over those signal lines, and then it modulates the audio on top of them. So it's crazy. It's like it's basically multi-purposing those.
Jesus
It's
Christ.
making the most of those three wires, and it's sending power over two of them. The same lines that the audio is sending the balance differential signal on.
Yeah, because the phantom power is like literally that's why they call it phantom, right? Because it's hidden in there. Like I
Yeah.
remember reading it as a kid, like because I had a mic that I needed phantom power to plug into my interface because the interface didn't have phantom power built in. My first interface I ever bought is this really crappy like one that I don't know why I've spent I didn't do my research,
Was
but
it M audio?
it might have been an M audio. I think it was a line 6 like UX1 or something or UX2. I just didn't have it was like an instrument one, but I had bought a separate phantom power unit, which I still have. It's just like all it does is two XLRs in and out, and it just powers it up. So
Yeah.
I should look into it because I do have the cheapest Behringer DI box that I could find, and it balances it. It can balance the signal, but it doesn't boost it for anything. And so like something with phantom power, man.
You gotta be wary too, though. When you use phantom power, you need to make sure what you're plugging it into supports phantom power because it's sending
Uh,
24 volts over those, so that can fry a lot of sensitive circuitry. So like pro grade stuff might be hardened to that, where you're
right.
not gonna break something by plugging it in, but like some cheaper equipment, if it's not supporting phantom power, it's gonna break it.
Oh, I guess someone on YouTube, Sixus Designs, saying, think of a large feather moving back and forth through the air. Impedance is similar. A larger feather would have more impedance. It says it's a wave.
Right. Yeah. So the as a large impedance source, a low impedance source, the bigger feather is going to be less, or let's say a rock compared to a feather. Feather is a high impedance source. It's
Right.
going to be disturbed by the impedance of the air it's propagating through.
Right.
It's
Its movement, it's the way its qualities are going to be changing, the way it's moving and stuff. You're saying is
Right. And so if your signal is a rock and the listener is the air that it's falling through, you want, the air is relatively low, like, drag is one thing for cars, but not for rocks. So the rock is our low impedance source that is kind of
right.
traveling, signaling unaffected by the impedance of the receiving air.
So you want high impedance for a signal, a source. You want
Inputs. So, low impedance for the source,
low
high
impedance
impedance for the receiver.
because then the receiver can decide then like it has the option to do high or does it or you
Um, so then you build a circuit with like different qualities. So a cheaper device would maybe have lower impedance for example, you know about like MOSFETs. That's like a type of
yeah,
transistor.
I remember bits about MOSFET. That's a
MOSFETs are
character in Star Wars, right?
yeah, Mossa the Fett. He's a big transistor and he's a gangster. He So the MOSFET, it's a type of transistor where the driving circuit, what's called the gate, the controlling
Mm.
element, it doesn't take any current other than enough to charge that gate up. So it takes a little pulse, and this is what all modern computers are made of, these MOSFETs. It takes a little initial pulse of energy, a little of a flow of electrons to charge up an element that's insulated with glass, and then it allows current to flow through a high current channel that's amplifying the signal. So I bring this up in saying that like modern op amps, you've got really expensive, nice audio quality op amps that have near like infinite input impedance because you're just sending charge down a dead end to this
Huh.
glass insulated dead end, and you're just sipping. It's a little bit of capacitive loading. This is why transistors, they try to get them so small to minimize the capacitive loading when you're switching them. So when you're changing the digital signals, and granted we're using them in an analog amplifier,
Right.
MOSFET can be used digitally or analog. It's the foundation to like silicon amplification. That and like BJTs, bipolar junction transistors. But that's kind of so. And then so you've got older transistors which are more robust. They're more immune to like electric shock and electrostatic discharges, or BJTs. So you might, for example, and you've also got something called JFETs. So there's all these different transistor technologies, and they all excel at different types of amplification, and they excel in different applications, and they each have their own inherent impedances, and you can make the device more complex. So if you want one quality, you could supplement that. So like modern stereo systems, they have these really complex class D amplification stages, but they supplement that with these input initial high impedance op amp stages. So you've got an op amp that's providing that high impedance matching, then it's boosting the voltage maybe like 100x, and then you've got the current gain stage. So your really heavy duty amplifier, that's not going to bump the volume up a ton. It's going to really just amplify the current. So you kind of have to think about it in like voltage is kind of like the anatomy and the shape of like the signal as we imagine it. But then there's also the like current element, which makes a lot more sense when you start to talk about, these impedances and the current being like a draw and a load on the signal.
They're inversely proportionate, right? Voltage.
They're not. They follow this law called Ohm's law. So
V equals IR.
V equals IR. Yep. And so the voltage is equal to the current times resistance. So if you bump up the voltage and the resistance is the same, you're going to bump up the current as well.
Right.
Yeah. So they're definitely proportionate, and if you think about it, if you think about impedance in the context of Ohm's law, R is resistance representing impedance. So if you think about your contact mic creating a pure tone, you're just playing a pure tone. It's receiving a pure vibration, just singular tone, and the amplitude of that signal is 10 millivolts. That's it's a small signal. Well, if the resistance is really low, the impedance is really low on the receiver, on the amplifier, or the input, well, that's a low resistance and an already weak signal, and now that's going to demand a lot of current. The lower the resistance, the more current that it pulls. So now this transducer is like, I'm trying to vibrate, but I'm also getting pulled down by this guy. I'm being smothered by a low impedance input. Can you believe that? So that's why
you need the preamp. That's why you need the preamp, right? So you can balance that equation out a little bit more.
Yeah, or eliminate it. If it's you can do it in two ways. If you've got a near ideal high impedance input or a near ideal completely low driver source, the low driver source, that's not realistic. Instruments are sensitive, transducers are sensitive, pickups are sensitive. So the way that the best path of attack is work on that input and get that input to be near ideal and minimize the loading of the cable by having a preamp that's appropriately located on the instrument.
So you're saying that I shouldn't use a $4 contact mic I got on eBay?
Maybe. No, I'd say you should use it, but
I
should upgrade it.
Yeah, I should. Well, if I'm going to use it all the time and perform with it, right? Because it does. I can hear the quality is. I mean, it is also a $60 banjo too. So there's a lot of there. It does the job. But for example, I have a guitar which it's a cheaper guitar. It's like It's not entry level, but it's like $200-$300 a Washburn. And part of why I got it was because it has an amazing preamp already on it. So it's like it has a balanced output. It has a balanced output.
Is it powered in? Is it
D battery? Powered? D battery. Nice. So it's got a tuner and it's got this. It's got a notch filter on it too to like enhance certain qualities of the guitar, and it's got a little EQ on it and its own little gain thing. And so when I went to the guitar shop and was playing around with different guitars, and I saw this like affordable guitar with this really good preamp, I was like, okay, this is probably worth $150 to sell, or like it's worth a third of the guitar is probably just worth this preamp. And
it's like more of a system.
Yeah. And so I'm just like, well, and that's what got me to buy it, because I plugged it into an amp and I could hear it. I could just hear it's a Fishman or something like that. I think it's Fishman preamp. So it's like this name. I've heard of the name, and it's good where it's like something that I need to install in a banjo, like get an actual one that can be powered, and like then the quality is there. Like right now, like my solution right now is just throw it into someone that's got a preamp and turn the bass completely off, because like just total high pass completely, and then because otherwise there's all this feedback and all this nastiness in the banjo's resonance chamber, and like the way that it's put in there, it's just like it's just but then again, I've played it. I just played it at the Cactus Club, the last show that we played, basically, and before the whole thing, and put it through a nicer, Alex Sound Guy's, one of his nice DI boxes, and he put it through a preamp on his mixing board, and it sounded great. And he put a little reverb on it, and put a little, like, conditioned it just a tiny bit to like make it sound real good, and it did. And I through a nice sound system, you can make it sound good, even if it's this $4 little contact mic, but you can you can make it sound good. But like you're saying, to have more control and to have like fix it at the source is probably the best solution. Like not every place I'm going to do is going to have a forgiving and knowledgeable and quick more sound engineer who's going to have the understanding and the ability to do that.
Right. You want to give them something that they can work with, like
right.
All those stages they have their functions, and they also kind of act as repeaters. It takes what they're working, it takes a signal, and it somehow enhances it. It makes it low impedance, it passes on a low impedance signal, and it might add a notch filter and like do all these things. So I definitely recommend throwing a. It sounds cool. It sounds like there's already a good solution with those DI boxes.
Yeah, either that or like I know there are boost pedals that like you can just give it a preamp right away. Like just give it a boost. Like go through a pedal with the banjo. It needs I know some tuners have like built-in boosters in them too and stuff. Like you can just get a little guy that I mean, this compressor could do it probably. Like I don't know. It's got level, tone, attack, and sustain. So this is a more compressor and transient manipulator, but it definitely has this level, which is gain, but it's noisy. It's a used thing. I got it for like $10, so I should. But there are better probably better solutions.
I'm looking if I can find a photo of it, but years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I designed a little circuit that was a preamp, phantom powered balanced output preamp for piezo transducers.
That's what I need, man.
So,
I don't think this is piezo. It's like off-brand. Piezo is a brand, right? Or is that a style?
No, it's a technology. Piezo is the transducer technology.
I always thought it was like a brand or something, like piezo mics, or like
Piezo Mike. I think that's the guy's name.
Hey, they call me Piezo Mike.
One. So this is my original. This is one of my.
I thought that said pimp. I thought it said pimp amp for a second.
Pimpin' amp, piezo amp. But so yeah, you can see like we were talking about transistors. This uses 2 transistors. These are a special type called JFET.
That looks like a squid or something.
Yeah, I kind of tried to make it like look fun and like look a little organic. It's
really
got a couple eyes, squid eyes. But yeah, this is an amp that it's amazing how much you can do, and how much you can improve a signal even with just a few components that you could breadboard at home, or you could buy copper clad board at, I don't know if Radio Shack is open these days, but you can buy that. Is it closed?
I think they're bankrupt. They're out of business. They've been for a few years, I think.
Oh Lord, rest in peace, Radio Shack.
I still have a Radio Shack cable. A couple of Radio Shack cables.
Yeah, I mean they were the good go-to. They were like Amazon Basics for electronics back in the
Yeah, and
day.
they had all the like hobby electronics stuff like everywhere. I remember seeing that. I don't know where I mean, people, there are hobby electronic stores now, but it's all online, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't know. They're pretty rare these days, but kind of a cool asset to like musicians and electronics people
Yeah, because there's a
to
whole
have.
DIY community around pedals and modular synths and stuff. Like, there are engineers they can make their living building these really cool. Like, it can be a redundant and ubiquitous technology that people know how to do, but they can build this really cool chassis, right? Or like
Right.
that's like
I mean, or it's imperfect and people love its flaws. Like
right,
it's a homemade thing that has this this tone to it, this timbre to it, because that person maybe was on a budget. They didn't know what the best
right.
parts were to use, but they make it look awesome. The art is great, and people love it.
Yeah, it's like this is the stomper, and it's like it's got this really cool like fabricated design where it's got this really, and you can, because let's be real, sorry, modular synth people, but I'm not, there's a lot of cool modular synth stuff, but it's the same thing with pedal people. It's really they're collectors. Like it's
Right.
it's
I
it's
know.
it's
As I'm like on the cusp of getting into modular synths, I'm like, it's a money pit. It's like it's such
yeah,
an expensive instrument, and yeah, I just
just to
don't
make
want to.
some
I want
bleeps
to
and
be someone
blorps.
who's making my own synth, my own modules, but I don't want to be someone who's like, my pretty, like they're
Well,
perfectly organized.
I mean, you could build them and sell them to those people, right? Like,
Right.
you get once you must, but you must understand them. You must
You
understand.
must become them.
It's a target research, marketing research. Yeah, I mean, I've seen that. And
Hear from me for like a month. That means I'm in a rabbit hole. Just give me a line. Please help pull me out.
DJ Camp,
Sorry, what were you saying?
DJ Hot Camp. Yeah, the well, I mean, I was just gonna go along the same lines of the modular synth, like I mean, I've met people. There are whole communities. There's a little community in Milwaukee, like, of everyone just swapping their Euro racks or their pedal boards and stuff. Like, people who are just, yeah, it's like a collector's thing. Like, the performance is like, and they perform modular synth. It's a weird thing to watch modular synth artists perform, because there are really, like, there are a lot of them who don't know what's happening, and it's like, but that's fine. Like,
It's playful.
yeah, it's
It's
playful. Like,
playful.
that's like my life is. That's how I make music too. Is I don't know what's happening. I just press buttons until something cool sounds, and then I go, oh shit, that's fucking cool. And
Looking for it.
and then,
Something's working right.
well, you do it enough over day after day after day for 14 years, and eventually things start to sound okay. But like, the performance aspect of it is interesting, because it's just like, you've been to a modular synth thing. It's like a lot of people that are just watching, and they're just like this, and they go,
Hmm.
and it just goes from like blurp, 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 blurp,
Right.
blurp,
I
blurp.
mean, there's also smoke and mirrors because, like,
Yeah,
even those astute
they're
observers,
like
you don't
wizards,
know what's pre-recorded, you don't know what's sequenced,
right?
and pre-sequenced and stuff. So, I'm not a musician. There is a lot of smoke and mirrors for me, and I appreciate it. I've
Well,
been to
most
a
art
couple
is smoke and mirrors
synth,
and performance.
synth a lot of smoke and mirrors.
I mean, performance is just, I feel like a lot of that. I mean, even just being an artist in general, like, I feel like a lot of people, like, it's so, and I think that's probably what a lot of people feel like with your little inventions, and like, you're able to create these things that can do incredibly powerful things to these seemingly magical processes of like these natural processes that we've been able to harness electricity and these crazy things,
You
and
know
it's
how
like,
like
feels like
you know how like
you're a wizard.
there's like hippie. You know how there's like hippie people who like heal with crystals? Maybe not hippie, but just like spiritual people who heal with crystals
Yeah,
and like talk
all the
about this
time.
whole. There's a lot of haters who are like, "That's so stupid. Like crystals don't have powers." And all these transistors and stuff we're talking about, those are crystals. Those are using
Hmm.
a silicon crystal lattice that's doped and implanted with ions in a
Hmm.
novel way to facilitate signals and to it's crazy. Like our internet runs on crystals. It's powered on this big mass of crystal creation. So it just
Hmm.
cracks me up, like you're talking about. Yeah, like yeah, what you can do with these things. But it is a lot of smoke and mirrors. There's all these tricks and there's all these like industry secrets and but I was kind of just wondering, like, yeah, the smoke and mirrors, like, how does that relate to like an observer's appreciation? Is it when you think you understand what they're doing? Is that when you can appreciate something most? Or like,
No,
you know what I mean?
I think there's everyone can appreciate things from different perspectives. Like I sometimes knowing more granular aspects of things, you can appreciate it in a different way, but sometimes it can be at least for me, like sometimes
It
I have to,
cheapens it.
yeah, I have to like turn my brain off when I go to perform or when I see performances sometimes. Cause I have to turn that analytical thing cause I'm just so used to thing. So what I do instead is instead of watching them and thinking like, well, how are they doing this? How are they doing this? What is that device? What is there going in there? What is the engineer? How's the acoustics? What are all these things that are happening? Right. Like I'm trying to understand that now. I like just go inwardly and like, when I go to a performance, it's really interesting with the crowd and the energy and things. Like I end up like coming to eureka moments more regularly. Like when I go out to performances, like things in my heads that I've been working through in my head, or like problems that I've been trying to solve, or like scheduling or process things or song, like ideas and concepts that I'm working on, they all of a sudden start bubbling up and things start firing and connections start happening when I'm in these when I'm in this type of environment, like it. And so I don't know. And so then I gain this appreciation based on my experience. So like people appreciate performance based on what connections they can like. It's really an emotional, like you can everyone can like appreciate art emotionally, and that's like but you might be alluding to the idea of, and I was talking about it too, about like turning off part I read, like turning off more of the intellectual things of like, okay, I don't really need to know what's happening musically, theoretically, or electronically. I can tune
Yeah.
into that appreciation of this human element, this like deeper spiritual or emotional or psychological element that is like breathing. It's like you can appreciate your breath every time you do it,
Yeah.
But if you're a scientist, you could be like, what's happening in the lungs and what's going on in here, like what
Right.
or. But that's interesting that you say about crystals. I didn't know that transistors. I mean, that makes sense. Like crystals are just really they're carbon structures, right? Like really rock solid. Well, they're not rocks, but they're right. Aren't they just?
Yeah, it's amazing. I don't know. They're I don't know. I'm not a chemist. I was really bad at chemistry, but
Me too.
it's they're hard, but they're brittle. Like you can split them. Like you could use a razor blade, and like depending on the
A
lattice,
transistor,
a jeweler cuts diamonds.
right?
They cut them at the right angles. They know how to cut them where they will shatter chunks off in the right way. Um, but I think it's amazing. Like yeah, like we people get arrogant with technology and Google. You get
Yeah,
arrogant. You
yeah,
like crystals don't have powers. There's no powers to be found. And sure, they're not going to make you levitate. They're not going to cure
yet,
cancer. But it's amazing. You can find natural crystals in like meteor
right.
formation, in like meteor rock, or in certain like rock that just develops naturally in the ground that acts like a light emitting diode. It is truly an organic light emitting diode that was found
What?
and made in nature. And when you apply a voltage across it, the rock lights up.
Huh?
It's crazy. I'm blanking on the name of this particular rock, but
Wow.
there, there was a scientist who discovered this rock, noted its properties, and it went for like a century unnoticed. He thought, oh, that's a novel property. Like, there's nothing to be learned here. And like, imagine like, yeah, he had this insight that maybe civilizations before us even had observed and just taken note
Right.
of and stuff. But there's so much
I
power and
think you're
like
right about the
mystery in the
arrogance.
natural world.
I think you're right about the arrogance. That's one of the things that we were talking, to loop back to what we were talking about earlier about these new kind of information laws, or like the laws of how our society has to run in this new things when institutions and things are falling apart, and we're trying to like humans are trying to grasp what's real and what's not, and what is the right philosophy, and everyone's like stuck in this like consumer nihilism, and like and stuck in existentialism, and like there's no meaning to things. It's just like a dumb universe, like this dumb meaningless universe, and I don't know, like I think there is this the arrogance of tech, because technology is so crazy, and it is, but like you're just saying, like this is already in nature, like these diodes already exist, like we just discovered this just a little bit ago, like how, like we just discovered how we could synthesize something that already has occurred, like
right. And it's like, it's not that it's technology that makes it unnatural. It's like I think we need to, in developing technology, we need to be more in tune with nature and make advancements that feel and are sustained. They feel more natural and they're more sustainable. Like we can't be making this much plastic waste. We just can't. We can't be dredging up old dinosaur bone liquid oil and creating these plastics and burning it. It's unsustainable. So, we need to think of a future where technology recycles itself, it's biodegradable, things like that. And hopefully at that point, so I'm trying to just draw this distinction that like maybe it's not that technology itself seems unnatural. It's like just the trend that society has been on in the past century, a couple centuries. We're kind of making some pretty unnatural technology.
So if you're talking about transistors are crystal lattices, and then you're kind of, and maybe you moved to Portland, right? So maybe the crystals are.
That's what I made the connection.
Like, you're seeing crystals everywhere now and being like, whoa.
What type of powers do you hold?
I mean, that's how I feel when I moved to River West here too. It's like I see crystals, and like people are talking about astrology, and I just had an astrologer on. I'm starting to like think about all these things that I once was very, very skeptical, and finding there's truth in a lot of things. There's truth. Skepticism is really healthy, I think, for sure. But the idea of crystals and stuff, like, well, if humans have magnetic and electrical waves, and if you could even say, like, people could say, okay, well, maybe even human intention and human energy could have some sort of electrical thing. So then it's not really.
About 5G, aren't you? You're 5G conspirator.
Well, I think the bats carry 5G, and that's that's why we got coronavirus, is through the 5G waves, mind controlling bats.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that. No, it was a meme.
Sorry to cut you off.
It was a meme. It was a meme I saw that was hilarious. But apparently people do believe that, or something like that. I don't remember, but.
So what you were thinking, like there is there's room for telepathic thought, or kind of these like profound, inspired.
I think telepathy, and like I don't know about telepathy. If you in like the sense of like, here I am, and I'm gonna like be able to shove you an idea with my mind, like force it into your mind, or let's say you can be receptive to it. But we know about illusionists, and we know about like social engineers, and we know about people who can manipulate people with certain, we understand the limits of cognition. We can hack people's behaviors, and we can hack people's things. But what I was talking about with crystals was like, okay, well, if humans are a magnetic field and you hold a crystal, right? Let's just say holding it, like put aside telepathy. I think that's just another layer of like, of speculation and confusing woo potential. But it's like you have just hold it, and you're a magnetic being with an electrical signal. Then if you're holding this diode, like that you put electrical current through it. Like, I mean, I've done that shit where I hold a voltmeter, and I know I have voltage and I'm current, and like
So the interesting thing is it's like it almost plays on the idea of impedance again. Not to like get too hung up on electrical engineering terms, but like if you think about our
really magnetic
fields,
impede on this conversation.
Yeah, sorry to impede on all these sub conversations. So if you think of our body's magnetic fields, like you mentioned, that's probably a pretty weak. It's a very sensitive, delicate thing. It's not easy. We don't see it very well. Like it's kind of just like this small quality of us. I would consider that to be like high impedance. So picking up a rock with your mind, that's like a very low impedance task. You're going to need a lot of force and energy, and
Right.
like we just don't have that with our mind power. But imagine a human, another person. We are so perceptive, and we are so in tune to the nuance of human communication that we have like our voice is a low impedance driving voice. Like you can hear what I'm saying, and there's no you are hearing me word for word. There's no confusion, there's no noise, a good signal to noise. It's a low impedance driving force. Your ears are very sensitive. That's high impedance. You can
Hmm.
hear a lot. You can hear from very far away. And your ears don't drag down my voice. They're so high impedance that it doesn't lessen the sound of my voice for others. So
Unless you, yeah, anatomy can ruin that, right? With your old, but
true, true. Yeah, right. Like if I'm talking at you, you could block my voice and it could be a shadow behind you. You can right. We're not so high impedance that we aren't just these completely passive observers. Like a crowd changes the acoustics of a venue. So we do have
right.
some perceptible spatial impedance. We impede on the actual sound. Um, but for the sake of example, your ear, it's in a controlled environment, it's pretty high impedance. And so I was thinking, like, with the mental aspect, I'm not beyond believing that there is this telepathic bond between twins, or there's some sort of
Right.
signals or senses that are, it's both a sensitive, weak, kind of like, almost imperceptible or imperceptible signal that we're sending to someone who then has a similar reception, a really,
Right.
really sensitive reception. So that might be like a high impedance source, high impedance listening. And through that, it's not ideal. It's not impedance matched, but you might still be able to communicate. You might be able to tell someone, hey, you're in danger. Like, you're behind someone, but they can tell you're
Right.
looking at them. That effect where people are like,
Yeah.
I've got the skin, or the hairs
They
on
know,
up on the
like,
back
you,
of
the
my neck.
feeling of being watched, or like, and I mean, people know, like, this is a highly cited thing that communication is 90% nonverbal. And is that 90%? Something like that. A huge chunk of communication is nonverbal, and not only that, yeah. So, like, I don't know. I just think, like, it's easy for people to understand, and for myself included, like, to understand about ourselves as a magnetic field with giant cable. Our spine is just this giant electrical cable that runs this computer brain that, sends out these magnetic fields constantly, right? Like,
Our spine is like a bus. We have all these like peripheral pieces of hardware,
yeah, yeah,
arms, and legs that plug into the bus.
yeah, exactly. And
And like an interface, yeah. Not like
and
a bus is in a yellow bus.
so like, I don't know. I agree. I don't think it's like beyond the realm of belief to like be thinking about this stuff, because I mean, I don't know. I think, I don't know. I remember when I was in college, I was really reading a lot of interesting things. Did you ever watch Spirit Science?
No.
I'll have
Did
to say,
they play that for you at Catholic school? Was
no,
that science
no,
class
they
at
would not
Catholic
play
school?
that. If they would not play Spirit Science at Catholic school. That's for dang sure. That
Okay.
this very much like, a lot of it is based on this, like, Drunvalo Melchizedek, who, like, runs this little cult, for lack of a better word, and he, like, wrote a couple books about, it's just like basic new age, like, handbook, woo woo handbook type thing, and a lot of it has, like, all great cults, is like, there has to be a core foundation, or at least a introductory foundation of something useful, right? Like that's how people describe Scientology, as like their actual useful social and psychological techniques that people use to get
Give
involved in Scientology.
sense of community. That's
And
a big
then,
one.
yeah, and it actually useful. It's like, oh, this is useful social skills, or psychological techniques that you can use to better yourself as a human. And
Right. So,
then
so
you get
I'm not
deeper
going
and
to
deeper.
defend Scientology, but you know about like Thetan counts with Scientology?
Yeah,
Like,
I've heard of that.
right, it's this garbage science. Sorry, Scientologists. It's like this garbage science where you hold this electronic device. It measure, it's kind of like ghost ghost hunting. It measures some EM or voltage potential, some galvanic skin response, and it tells you. And it might not even be any. It might be completely disconnected from the probes you're holding. It might just be the business unit of the Scientology department just being like, give him a high Phaeton count. We think he's good for the money.
Yeah.
But it gives you this score, and that's kind of like confession in the Christian faith, where you're like, oh, I have a high Phaeton count. I need to purify myself. And to do that, my penance, it's weird, Scientology, your penance is basically just giving more money to this cult or this group. Sorry, this group. We're going to be on a couple different lists after this. But it's similar. Like you're saying, there must be value in this. And for some reason, we value this, like, it's almost like
well, I wasn't referring to the Thetan counts as the thing that has value.
Oh,
I'm talking about I'm talking about like
practices in general.
There's like certain techniques and beliefs that people are taught in like the beginner's handbook, like not the Thetan stuff. Like they're just like, how do you deal with certain spiritual and psychological questions, and how do you interact with people in general, like just like that's what I mean by useful, valuable things. Like you have
another one is yoga. There's a handful of cults that are kind of like
right.
They have yoga as an element, in which that's a great foundation. That's a core building block that can lure people in. It's it's meditative. It's great exercise, and it's just like making you more mindful and ripe for maybe some more sinister components of that cult.
Yeah. So we should start a cult.
I'd follow you. I can be your beta.
It's gonna be a cult. Oh, no, that's just so bad.
That's the 2021. Was that a sneak preview?
Dude, that's like such a terrible name that I might just use it just because it's that bad. Like, just Cullah with a T at the end.
You know that Ian is exhausted, like album names when he's like digging deep to the bottom of the list.
I have better ones, but I just think that's just such a funny, so awfully bad that it could.
Ian, you have the mustache, you have the long hair and the facial hair.
I'm growing my hair and I'm growing my beard for this quarantine. Like could start. I just got to start memorizing some Alan Watts lectures, and then like, boom, cult right there, easy.
Yeah,
easy.
You need like a good silk bathrobe or something, or something.
Yeah, a kimono or. I almost got it with this, like a deeper V, like get those cotton. Like I've been getting, things are weird when Facebook is advertising me like these medieval like Celtic garbs. I was like, it's like advertising the. I'm like, and I'm looking at them and be like, okay, yeah, like that.
If you think so, Facebook.
I'm actually like really intrigued. Like. Dude, they know already. They already know. Like, I'll search on Google, and Facebook will know. It's probably because it's on my phone, right? Like, it shares all the information. Like,
do they have?
I searched air
on your camera feed where they're monitoring the depth of your V and looking for changes.
Like, oh, this is a 12-inch V. Like
Ian's going deep. Let's really sell him on the 20-inch this month.
Let's give him the Renaissance advertisements. Yeah.
Are you going to Ren fairs these days?
Well, I hope. I'm sure the new ones are coming. I haven't gone to everyone. I have never gone to a Renaissance fair, but I want to.
Oh, dude, the Audubon Center in the North Shore of Wisconsin of Milwaukee. They used to host a pretty good.
I know there's a big one in like Racine. That's like the big one that everyone goes to.
Nice.
Yeah, but I haven't been. I know a lot of musicians who go there and perform, and they love it, and they can go and sing the old weird music, and that's like finally a place where people like want to hear that. I think more people should hear it. I mean, personally, but like I don't know, shit, man.
I had fun at Patty's Pub in Milwaukee listening to folk Irish music that one time.
Yeah, that there's not a lot of places like that in Milwaukee. I mean, I know that's like the learners trad session. So there's some people there who knows what they're doing. There's some people there who don't. But were you there when there was a freaking crap, a mallet?
I wasn't there for live. I wasn't there for any live stuff. They were just playing some good like folk Irish music when we were
Oh,
hanging out the time.
oh shit! I'm trying to think of this type of instrument that's played with a mallet. It's like it looks like the inside of a piano. Oh shit! It's been so long since I've seen that instrument. It's really old.
How is it different from a xylophone?
Well, a xylophone is like ceramic tiles that you play, right? Or like this is
Inside of a piano. Piano has strings, and the inside there's hammers that hit. Are you plucking the
hammers
strings? Are you
inside.
hitting the
Oh,
striking the strings?
yeah.
Or are you hammering them with this instrument?
Dulcimer? No. Hammered dulcimer? That sounds right. Something like that. I think hammered is in the name. Or like a it can't be dulcimer. I don't know what a
Oh,
dulcimer.
I looked it up, and it looks exactly like what you're talking about.
Is it a hammered dulcimer?
It's called a hammered dulcimer.
Okay, I'm glad. I learned it. You said hammer. I'm like,
Teamwork. I did the easy word of hammered, and you got dulcimer.
Yeah, the hammered dulcimer. Some motherfucker had a hammered dulcimer there, and he knew how to play it. And
you hit it with like spoons or like these little like sticks.
little sticks. Yeah. So so like there's a guy there who brings that, and it's fucking crazy. And then there's concertinas, and then there's some guy who's just learning fiddle, and he's just terrible. And everyone, but you go to County Clare, and you go to County Clare, that's on like the Lower East Side, and that's where the like orchestral musicians play, and it's like you need to know 100 songs just off the like memorized if you're going to be in the circle. And it's all like the elitist players and stuff. But the last time I went to those, there was some PhD in Irish harp that went there, and it was just like amazing. And there's this old granny who like is just nailing it. Like she's not like the way she's playing it is like she's not even moving, but it's crazy. Like it's such subtle movements that she's been doing it for 60 years straight. Every year, like learns and you could tell she would get frustrated with people if they didn't know the this old ornery grandma who was like, come on, play it right. It's like, grandma, you've been playing this for 60 years. But yeah, no, the hammered dulcimer, those are cool. I want to get some of those old medieval instruments and stuff. There is a Yulin pipe sample on my last album. At the end, the last song, the last solo is a Yulin pipe, which is spelled like Eileen kind of, and it's I'm like, I need to end this album with a bang. Got to do a Yulin pipe solo.
Did you record it, or did you?
It was a Contact library. So
what's that mean?
Contact is this. It's from Native Instruments. It's this sample. Like this, it's this software that people can load in samples, and they can create this really rich environment where people can sample certain things, and you can have it interact with different notes. Like when two things is all these conditional logic that you can build into it.
It's a modal synthesis. They take the samples and they model the instrument based on the sample, right? The input sample.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I did a little bit of that for percussive synth. I was using something called Prony analysis, which is similar to like Fourier transforms, where you take a sound, a note, and you decompose it into a set of frequencies that are decaying. So it's got frequency, amplitude, and a decay rate, and this Prony analysis is geared towards percussion, where there's a fast attack, sustained decay, and it was really cool. Yeah, you could take the sound of a percussive instrument and you load it in there, and all of a sudden it's like you can explore all these different resonant qualities of the percussive instrument. You could stimulate it in a different way that sounds like you're like scratching the membrane of a drum, or you could really bang it and sound like you just blew this thing up, and you really, you're kind of igniting all these resonating qualities of it. So yeah, that's cool. I'd never heard of
Contact
Contact
with a K. And there's free libraries out there. Like I have one with whispers. Like there's a whispers and a music box free one that I got is creepy whispers. And it's just like all the vowel sounds and male and female, and you can blend them all together in different ways. So like you just have, and I wanted to use it on this last album, but there wasn't a good spot for it. There's some tracks that didn't make it on the album that I was using it, where it's just like, or like
save that for the Cullah, the cult.
Good cult. Damn,
Cullah.
It just sounds like, it just sounds so bad.
Yeah, the cult. It sounds offensive. It sounds inappropriate.
Yeah. It's like gullet. It's like your
like gullet. What is a gullet?
Yeah. Gullet. Is it somewhere inside your? It's not like your gut.
Oh my, the esophagus.
Yeah, it's somewhere in your gut, right? Your gullet.
Yeah.
Gullet. Yeah. Shit, man. Well, we've been chatting for 3 hours.
I know. I just looked at that. My blood sugar's down here.
Before my mind completely starts going erratic, but I think I could probably go for a couple more hours, but I don't really want to. We can.
I think on a lot more lists if we kept going another couple hours.
Yeah. Well, there's plenty of interesting things to talk about. There's no, we always have really stimulating conversations.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I look forward to hopefully the next one we get to be in person. And I look forward to playing chess soon with you.
Yeah, I haven't played chess in a little bit. I have my pad, and just like the ones we played in high school, the little mat, rather, and that little bag of pieces.
A little fun factoid about Cullah. In high school, we used to play chess late night at the park, and we'd been stopped and searched by police officers where they asked us, "Hey, what's in this little baggie?" And we said, "Sir, there's chess pieces in there," and they completely didn't believe us.
Like,
searched there and found our tournament set in there and just got a good laugh. They were like, "Get out of here!"
Smoke hookah, drink tea, and play chess. Like I remember that time. Yeah, we were at Cullah Park, I think it was, and yeah, we were playing, and yeah, obviously the park's closed at 9 p.m. I didn't really know that. The cop came, saw the car, saw us in there, and yeah, he's just assumed you're probably smoking doobies. It shines the light in our eyes. Like it's like, come on, dude. Like
very rude. It's so rude. We had a lantern that we were playing with.
We're playing chess, and he comes and we're like, what are you kids doing? Like, we're playing chess, and he's like, thought we were being smart, like being a smart ass, and be like, we're playing chess, doing this. And then I remember him. He's like, he searched the bag, and he's just like, and then he realized we were just actually playing chess.
I think so. To this day, I think he stays awake at night thinking we had hidden drugs in the bottom of the piece and put those felt seals back on there.
Yeah, they're just covered in LSD. Yeah,
he could have had the biggest drug bust of his career, but he blew it.
I just remember thinking when he left, like, well, what can we do now? Like, well, I guess we got to go smoke weed and do drugs in my basement. I
know, we just lost this career.
We can't have fun and play chess at the park. I get it. The parks should have they should close at a certain time. I get it.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, it could have been a little nicer. It's North Shore police, right? All the high school kids are they're mortal enemies, right? I think I remember a time when you were in middle school and you were telling me about, I think I went to your place and you would just come back and you would describe the situation where cops came and stopped you guys skateboarding and stole your skateboard.
Oh yeah, I mean it's crazy to me, suburbia, how
stole your shit
people can be. A whole neighborhood, they fuel the cops' behavior and get them to snuff out what is really special and formative for young people. Granted, cops are doing crazy stuff all over, and this is nothing compared to all.
Oh yeah, I follow Sean King on Facebook. I see shit every single day. It's disgusting.
Right, but yeah, it is how you're right. They're taking kids' skateboards or soccer balls because they're playing
stealing shit.
Spot.
Yeah,
shady.
Yeah, well, so come a long way. So let's play some midnight chess at the park, and now that we're adults, we could get actually penalized. Like, so I think it'd be worth the risk. It'd be a good rush. Have to do,
Oh, we
But
could be chess bandits, you're saying?
yeah, it'll be easy though, because I'll just beat you in 4 moves, and then
Oh, good one.
just kidding. I don't even remember that strategy.
Oh, yeah.
I remember doing that a couple times though to some people. It's a really like emasculating and demoralizing. Losing in chess in 3 or 4 like turns is just like, fuck. I can't believe I just did this. I know the tech. I know it. I can see it coming, but I'm not an expert by any means. But I know Nick Cross, our other childhood friend, he just went crazy playing chess. Constantly now. He's just doing it all the time. I don't know if he still is, but he was for a while. And I played him. I don't remember being better than him in high school. So I was like playing him one time, and he just destroyed me. He knew all the strategies. He memorized all the different strategies, and he knew all. So it's like. Once you're again, I haven't done that, and if you haven't done that, then we should still be at the same level.
Okay. I think we're going to have that same enjoyment of when we played back in the day.
Yeah. Once this whole thing goes, and I'm able to finally get my van and be road ready, that'll be coming. We can go to some parks in Portland and enjoy it.
Sweet, yeah. Looking forward to when the tour works out.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, who knows?
Ian, thanks for having me on. This is really fun.
Thanks for coming. I think this is the longest Cullahcast has ever been. So one for the books. Thanks for everyone who was tuning in. We had some consistent people on here. Thanks for the people who are commenting and for and engaging in this. And until next time, next week I got 2 people on, a photographer, and I got very excited about both the guests, but next Tuesday I have this guy, Kevin MacLeod, who is an American composer, and he's a Creative Commons composer, and he's doing very well with his Creative Commons, and I've been modeling a lot of like he's been an inspiration. He's from Green Bay, actually, and he's had his music in the movie Hugo, and a bunch of by Scorsese and a bunch of other things by giving it all out for free. So like that's going to be a really interesting conversation. So tune in for that, people who are tuning in now. But otherwise, thanks Ray for the great conversation. We got to bring you back on and talk more about this stuff.
All right, sounds good.
All right,
thanks,
brother.
Ian.
I'm gonna cut to the sound or to the music, and then I'll still be able to chat with you. All right, bye everybody. Right.